but we have appointed you as co-host. We can show here. Alhamdulillah, this will be a very exciting courses we are offering. We have a very comprehensive program involving more than 15 lecturers for the whole Department of Economic, Kuliah of Economic and Management Sciences, IIUM. The course will run for 12 weeks. Before I invite our dear Dean to moderate the session today. As usual, we brief you a bit about our technical issues. We will mute everyone throughout the course to avoid background noise. And our chat box, we will enable it during the break and then at the end of the session. So we invite everyone to share their response and their question in the chat box. But in the YouTube, you can just write. There is no restriction in the YouTube. So on behalf of Datuk Jamel and everyone from our office, we welcome everyone to our classes today. So now we invite our dear respected Dean, Professor Ghairu Razmi, to moderate the session. Prof.
Okay, thank you, Brother Shahran. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi.
Okay, first of all, thank you everyone for attending this session on the Certificate of Islamic Economics. So yesterday we have that programs on the Certificate of Islamic, Certificate of Fiqh and Usul Fiqh. Okay, so I think some of you may have already attended the launchings of this program. So I'll try to make it very quick so that we'll have time for our lecture, for our classes. So basically today we are going to have two lecturers, okay, in this discussing four topics. So we have the first part of our program today is going to be delivered by Professor Dr. Mohamed Aslam Haneef. I think everyone's already knows Prof. Aslam, and that the second part is going to be delivered by Associate Professor Dr. Mohamed Mahyudi, Mohamed Yusop. The topics that we are going to have today is on why Islamic economics, what is Islamic economics, delivered by Prof. Aslam, and then we have from Dr. Mahyudi, methodology of Islamic economic and Islamic Ethic. With that, I think I would like to pass it to Prof. Aslam to start the sessions.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thank you very much, Prof. Ghairu and Brother Shahran, and to all participants of the certificate program. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Prof. Ghairu, for the intro, and Brother Shahran for the overall overview of the technicalities. Let me just say that we're targeting about 1.5 hours, so we may have to run into a little bit into the break time. I hope nobody will mind. You know, this particular part of the course is as the topic on the screen. I hope everybody can see the screen. That basically the session today is taken from a course that we teach at the undergraduate level at the Bachelor of Economics program, called Foundations of Islamic Economics. I think what we are going to cover today in the 3 hours is probably it takes about 6 weeks to do in our normal course. Yeah, so please bear with me if you know, we are going through the materials in a very brief you know, manner. I'm sure for many of you who are attending the course, you are not new to economics or Islamic economics. And for those who are new, I hope that this will give some inputs to you. Now, in order to begin, as mentioned by Prof. Ghairu, we decided to make the sessions answer a central question, and that is, so in my two sessions this morning, basically we are answering very straightforward questions. The questions are, why do we need Islamic economics, Islamic finance, Islamic business and accounting and so on? Why do we need it? Yeah, so we want to make a rationale for Islamic economics. All right. And then, although it's put as a second question, it's a slightly brief part of the presentation. What is Islamic economics? Now, why we spend more time on the why and less time on the what is because in the weeks to come, you will be exposed to what Islamic economics and finance is. Okay, so for today's session, I'm just going to maybe very briefly try to give a working definition of Islamic economics, right? So more time will be spent on the why. And I think it's very important for us to know why we have to talk about Islamic economics. The reason being that we already have an economics that is, taught globally. All countries in the world, whether it is in the West, whether it is in the developing countries, in the Muslim world, we have universities. And in our universities, we teach economics. And this economics is basically global. In other words, it's taught in all countries. We use the same textbooks. Yeah. Well, we generally speaking, anybody who takes economics has the same understanding of theory of consumer behavior, theory of producer behavior. So we really have to ask ourselves, why do we need to have an alternative to this existing system? After all, many people will say that, the material conditions of the world today, in general, are the best ever, right? We have the most comfortable material living, despite all the inequalities that may be there. Why do we need an alternative, right? So we'll spend a little bit of time on this. And then for our case, why do we need Islamic economics? Alternatives are already there. There are many people who put forward alternative economics, alternative finance, but we want to ask specifically, why Islamic economics? All right. And I think for anybody who knows the foundations of Islamic economics course, you know that we argue this question, why we need Islamic economics. We say that underlying every economics is a worldview. And definitely, this worldview impacts the way we understand and we practice our economics. And therefore, we want to talk about, the need for Islamic economics is because of the worldview. So we will try to explain and do a comparison between the worldview elements in Islamic economics and in modern economics. Make a comparison, and hopefully we will be able to show, because there are differences in that foundation, in that worldview, therefore there is a need for Islamic economics. We are not able to accept the current economics, in its totality. Now, I want to also specify here, our approach in the IIUM, in the Kuliah, in the department, as well as I must also say with the majority of Islamic economists who have been writing for the last 50 or 60 years, we agree that we do not have to throw out everything from modern economics. All right? There are a small minority of scholars who feel that we need to throw away everything from neoclassical economics, but let me be very clear. My position has always been that we do not need to throw away everything, but we need to critically evaluate what modern economics says. We need to do an evaluation, all right? And from that evaluation, we either accept, reject, or we modify, all right? So our position is to have critical interaction from an Islamic perspective. So we are going to critically evaluate modern economics and decide what we can adopt, what we need to modify, and what we need to reject. All right. And then a smaller part of this morning's, the first half, will be on what is Islamic economics. We will try to do a kind of a working definition, rather than talking about, details. Because as I said earlier, you will be able to get a clearer picture of what Islamic economics is as we go on, the next, I think, is it 11 weeks or something? Yes, you will be able to get a better picture of what Islamic economics is, and then there'll be a very, very short summary. All right, so let's move, because we really don't have much time. Why do we need an alternative? All right, and I think this is very, very, very important question. And as I mentioned just now, it is not only in the Muslim world or among Islamic economists who are talking about an alternative. All right, at least in near memory, all of us can remember. If you're in Southeast Asia, of course, you will never forget 1997, 1998 Asian financial crisis. It was probably the worst crisis that many of us have gone through. Just the collapse of the financial markets in many Asian countries. More recently, 2008, 2009, we had something that was termed the subprime crisis, coming from America, but really impacting Europe. And some countries in the Muslim world were also affected. But it was really something that hit America and Europe. And what is very interesting, during that crisis, there was a briefing done by the London School of Economics to the Queen, about what the problem was, and what they were doing to resolve the crisis. And after hearing the briefing, the Queen asked, how come nobody noticed this thing coming? After all, we claim that we have all the sophisticated models and techniques to analyze and to make predictions. Why did we not notice the problem coming? All right. And very interestingly, the commentators, they argued that there are different reasons for the crisis. Some are economics. For example, in the subprime crisis, the interest rates, because we're talking about conventional system, they were artificially low. Okay, so interest rates were artificially low. There were also a very high level of debt, especially when interest rates are low. More people will take loans. People who shouldn't have taken loans took loans, all right, and they got into debt. And then when the interest rates rose, many of them were hit. They could not pay back their loans, etc. So, but these are economic reasons, economic factors, all right. Now, there were also non-economic reasons for the crisis. And I think this is what I want to focus on, because a lot of writers, even in the West, they have talked about these non-economic factors. And they are saying it. It's not Islamic economists who are saying, although we have been talking about this for decades, but for this particular subprime crisis, many of the critics of mainstream neoclassical economics, They said that the reason why the subprime crisis happened is because of the underlying worldview of that mainstream neoclassical economics. All right. So, what is it that this underlying worldview said? One, the belief science is not supposed, apparently in the West, right? Modern science says that belief has no place to play in science. And yet, commentators in the West say that there was a belief among mainstream neoclassical economists that economics cannot be wrong. Okay? They cannot be wrong. A belief. Secondly, assumption. We all make assumptions in economics, right? There are so many jokes about economists because of assumptions that we make. So the assumption that was being made by these neoclassical economists was that markets will solve everything. So if the interest rate goes down, then more people will come in, there will be greater supply, there will be greater demand for loans. And when there's greater demand, then the interest rate will rise if the supply is constant. So anything, prices going up and down, the market will resolve. Unfortunately, in the case of subprime crisis, and also actually in real life, markets do not sometimes solve all problems. Thirdly, and this is a very, very important part of modern economics, that from Islamic point of view, we have a great, I think, reservation. Yeah. Our current models in economics recommend, accept man's greed as being a good trait in economics and finance. Man is the, self-interested, greedy maximizer. This is the economic agent that we study in our models, right? So this neoclassical economics foundations say that greed is good. All right? Greed is good. Now, this is a major challenge because there is no ethical system that will accept greed as being a good trait for human beings. Yeah, greed is always seen as a negative trait. All right, but it is part and parcel of mainstream economics. I don't know if any of you had seen the movie Wall Street many years ago. Basically, in that movie, that is what the main character was actually giving advice. Greed is good. All right, and so that's part of our foundation of the models that we use. And finally, the fourth reason was that it was ethically acceptable to transfer risk in order to maximize your own gains. So if I'm having an instrument that is actually going to lose money, if I can transfer it to somebody else, it doesn't matter whether that person is going to lose and he is going to be, affected negatively. That doesn't matter, because what matters is I don't get hit. So if I'm losing something, if I can transfer this to somebody else, that's fine. Ethically, it is okay. It is part of business. Why? Because you're only thinking of yourself. All right. Now, these 4 points, and there were many other points, these are the 4 points that were given by Western commentators themselves about why we cannot accept this economics that we have today. And of course, when I say economics, I'm referring to the business, I'm referring to the finance, because it basically is coming from that same foundation. So we need an alternative because of this. How can we, from an Islamic point of view, accept these 4 points? It is unacceptable. It is unacceptable. And I will try to argue this as we go along. Why Islamic economics? Why not we just follow, some of these other alternatives that have been given in the West? And believe me, some of those people who have argued and criticized neoclassical economics, Sometimes their scientific arguments are actually even better argued than Islamic economics. Yeah, the way they criticize neoclassical economics and some of the alternatives they put are very well argued. Why do we need to talk about Islamic economics? All right. And of course, another way of putting this is, yeah, we have the conventional system that has been there for 350 years. It has been practiced. It has brought material progress. It has brought well-being to humankind. Why do we need Islamic economics? Especially now when anything you talk about Islamic economics is sometimes, seen negatively in many parts of the world. Why do we need Islamic economics? I think this is a very, very important question to ask ourselves. Yeah, and that is why I go back to some of our even Western writers. We don't want to give a claim at this moment from Quran or Hadith. We just go back even to the writings of Western scholars. So Joseph Schumpeter, in his 1954 classic History of Economic Analysis, it's a very big book, he said that any analytic effort, analysis, models, theories, anything that we do in the name that involves analysis is of necessity preceded by a pre-analytic cognitive act called vision. All right? Meaning to say, all economics, before we go into the analysis, it begins with a vision or a worldview. This is Joseph Schumpeter. All right. Now, this term vision, I think we can broadly, for this purpose of this class, we can equate it with worldview or even ideology. All right. Meaning to say what? Modern economics, the one that created the crisis, is not value free. It is value loaded. All right. And what we will argue is these values ultimately come from our worldview. All right, worldview. So we need to get everybody to agree that modern economics, firstly, is not value free. It is value loaded. And secondly, we get our values of the system from that worldview. The foundations of the discipline is based on the worldview. Now, if this is something that we accept, then because there are different worldviews in the world, simple in economics, you have the capitalist system and the socialist system. They are both coming from different worldviews. All right. So if we accept the fact that there are different economic systems and different economics, and why do I say make a difference between the system and the economics? When I say economics here, I'm referring to the schools of thought in economics. So we have neoclassical economics, that is the mainstream that we teach in universities. But we also have institutional economics. We have post-Keynesian economics. We have the more radical schools of economics. Many different schools. They also have underlying worldviews that may differ. All right? Now, going back to the earlier point that there are assumptions in economics, many of the assumptions that we make in economics may not be true. And they are not universal. Okay, this, I took from another Western scholar, John Stuart Mill. He is one of the founding fathers of modern economics. And when he was writing in the 19th century, he basically said this in one of his books. The assumptions that we make in our models, they may not be true. So when I say that man is greedy, this may not be true. And it probably is not universal. It may be true for some people, but it is not true for other people. Okay? This is coming from Western scholars themselves. Yet, we teach in our universities, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Nigeria, in all Muslim countries, man is greedy, man is greedy. Man only thinks of himself. Right? Why? They themselves are saying that these assumptions may not be true and may not be universal. And yet, we don't question this when we teach our economics, right? So it's very important for us to keep this in mind when we are trying to develop alternatives, all right? And secondly, John Stuart Mill also says economists differ in their opinions. Even in his time, in the 19th century, there were debates between different political economists, and he said that these differences are because of their differences in their sources of knowledge. Of course, in the time of John Stuart Mill, he was referring to those political economists who used deduction as the main method of developing knowledge, versus those who wanted to talk about induction. So there was a deduction versus induction debate for 50 plus years. But we can accept this idea because sources of knowledge for Islamic economists now will also include not only the universe, it will also include revelation. So if you take revelation as a source of your knowledge, then economics will be different. You will argue differently, right? So what I'm trying to do with these few slides is just to show you that actually, even in the West, they have admitted centuries ago that different economics is possible. It's legitimate, right? The worldviews differ, our sources of knowledge differ, and therefore we should be developing an economics that is in line with our own value system. So what we're going to do, we are going to look at the worldview or the vision of Islamic economics and compare it with the worldview or vision of modern economics. This is being done to answer the question why we need Islamic economics and finance. Okay, so if we can show that the worldview is different, then we make a case for Islamic economics. All right. So when we talk about worldviews, I think it's very important to just give a very simple overview. Now, I'm sure many of you have also joined the classes with the Kuliah of Islamic Criminology, the first level, and now you're doing the second level. But I think in the first level, for sure, somebody would have talked about worldview, right? So whatever they said, please keep in mind. I'm just trying to give a very general overview, all right? Now, how I at a phenomena, economic phenomena, you interpret certain things, right? You see prices going up today in the world. Many countries are facing economic conditions that are not so good. Yeah, inflation, price levels are increasing. Unemployment is there. People losing jobs. So when you look at your current economic situation, you see something, right? So worldview, how they explain it is what you think you see. So when you look at something, you see something, right? But so you think you see this. How you understand that condition, all right? And then the judgment about what you see. This is good, this is bad, this needs to be improved, this needs to be reduced. Your judgment, all right? The assumptions that you make when you see that phenomena. Who is that economic man? How is he relating to the universe? The assumptions of your models when you want to do the description, the prediction, right? Stems from your worldview. So what is this worldview? It is impacted by many factors. In Western works that talk about worldview, sometimes they will put religion as part of culture. But I think from an Islamic point of view, we want to separate it because religion is not necessarily culture, is not necessarily part of culture. In fact, from an Islamic point of view, we do have a very famous hadith, that talks about, what happens when your culture and your religion, interact. If the cultural element is in line with the deen, then we can accept it. But if it is not in line, then we have a priority to go to the Quran and to the Sunnah. So I prefer to separate religion from culture, but these are different factors that impact worldview. And this also applies in the Muslim world. Even though we may all be Muslims, but because our culture differs, our education differs, our history differs, our geography differs, and of course the technology that we are using in our countries differ, this has an impact on our worldview. Certainly when we compare us with modern economics or modern Western societies, then certainly worldviews will differ because of all these factors. All right. So what's a worldview? It is more than just an interpretive lens. A worldview perspective shapes and influences and generally directs a person's entire life. Because people behave as they believe. Yeah, belief. So belief again comes right into the picture. Because you behave as you believe. Iman, amal. The worldviews guide the development of the values that inform your decisions and actions. Okay, so your worldview is basically going to determine, right, your values, and those values are going to be impacting the decisions you make in economics. Do you choose project A or project B? Do you choose halal or haram? This is going to be determined by your value system, and your value system ultimately goes back to your worldview. All right. So the worldview is the core essence and unchanging values that you keep. All right. Now, how do you analyze the worldview? Of course, this can be a whole, course by itself. And in IIUM, there is a course on Islamic worldview. Yeah. But for our purpose, we are going to talk about certain components or elements in the worldview. And again, this is stated by scientists globally. Any discussion of worldview must include views on the following components: religion, God, man, nature, knowledge, aim in life. Okay, even if you are a atheist, you don't believe in God, then in your worldview you will say God doesn't exist, but it must talk about God. Okay, so let's look at these components: religion, God, man, nature, very briefly, right? Because this part in our course in FIE, it takes about maybe a week or sometimes even more than a week to give in detail, but we're going to do it in maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Yeah, so please bear with me. Since we are talking about Islamic economics, so we are using the adjective Islamic in front of economics. And of course, when you say Islamic, you're talking about the religion of Islam. So let's begin our discussion on the components by looking at what we mean by religion. And I'm sure everybody here is well versed, so we don't really have to spend too much time on this. Yeah. In Islam, from an Islamic point of view, we all accept the idea that Islam is deen. We use the term in the Quran. The term for religion is deen. All right. Now, if you want to know in greater detail about this concept of deen, please read, among others, the one that we use in FIE, Professor Naqib Al-Attas, Islam and Secularism, a very detailed discussion of the concept of deen. Yeah? But Islam is deen. Now, I'm going to look at Montgomery Watt, a Catholic scholar he used to be based in the University of Edinburgh, and he wrote this book, What is Islam, in 1979. Okay, so I'm using him. Now, I like to use Montgomery Watt rather than Sheikh, whoever, because sometimes when you are speaking to Western economists, you need to quote a scholar in the West. And in the case of this particular aspect, Montgomery Watt, I think, is saying something that we can all agree with. Yeah, Islam, our view of Deen is it is a whole way of life. Yeah, private and public. It covers theology, ibadah, forms of worship, yeah, political theory, and even code of conduct, even hygiene, yeah, even etiquette is part of Deen. So everything that we do, we consider to be part of Deen. Unlike in the West, what is religion to them? And again, we are talking about, in the last 400 years. It means a way of spending an hour or so on Sunday. So basically going to church on Sundays, yeah. This is religion. If I can cut it short, religion in the West is basically certain rituals as understood in the West today in general. Now, there are many people in the West, of course, who have a different view of religion. Maybe some of them even see religion as a whole way of life. But in general, in the West, this is how they look at religion. And that is why in many studies, when they want to show how religious the people are in the West, they will look at church attendance. How many people go to church on Sunday, right? Now, from an Islamic point of view, yes, of course, going to the mosque is a very important part of being a Muslim, but we wouldn't equate how religious you are only with your mosque attendance, right? We have many other things to talk about religion, because religion is a full way of life. Look at the last part of this statement. Religion has nothing to do with commerce or economics. So this is the view that is adopted by many people, if not the majority of people in the West over the last 400 years. All right? So they have done what we call the secularization of society. So this is a very important part of Western society. Over the last 300, 400 years, it has happened in the West. And therefore, when we study economics, politics, psychology, sociology, all these disciplines are actually coming from Western European experience over the last 300 to 400 years. Whenever we teach economics, who do we go back to? Adam Smith. When did Adam Smith write his Wealth of Nations? 1776, right? So basically, whatever textbooks we are using ultimately go back to that period of time. In this, in the last 400 years of the West, we get all our disciplines that today we teach in universities in the Muslim world. And this 400 years in the West coincide with a period where the West underwent enlightenment, reformation, industrialization, and also secularization. All right. Now, in our FIE class, we spend quite a lot of time talking about, this process of secularization. But I think I will leave it, because I'm quite sure all of you have already, if you have attended the course by IRK, the first level, they would have talked about secularization, secularism as an ideology, secularization as a process, and then even the concept of secular, right? This world, here and now. So I don't want to maybe repeat, what has already been informed. So I'm just trying to look at the components. So as far as religion is concerned, we look at religion as a complete way of life, including economics. In the West, economics has nothing to do, or religion has nothing to do with economics. Now, what about God? Now, this is not, again, in the IRK course, you may have had much more detailed discussion about Allah and the theological arguments, the sifah of Allah, yeah, and discussion. For this particular part of the discussion on economics, I just want to say that in the Islamic view, in Islamic economics, Of course, we accept the idea of Tawheed, which is the core value in Islam. There is only one God or Ilah that is to be worshipped, and that is Allah. And of course, we add our Shahada with the second part, that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his messenger and prophet. Yeah. Now, there are many asma of Allah that you find in the Quran, right? And when you look at some of them, for example, Ar-Razzaq, the provider, Malik al-Mulk, the eternal owner of sovereignty, of everything, Al-Muqsit, the equitable. Now, when you look at these asma, many of them have economic implications. So when you say Allah is Ar-Razzaq, it means that ultimately Allah is providing rizq for you. Now, how does that affect economics? Very significantly. We don't accept the idea that we ourselves are the sole provider. Yeah, of course, the male, the father or the husband is supposed to provide for his family. But we also understand that Allah is Ar-Razzaq, the ultimate provider. Which means that whatever we provide is not coming from us only, but ultimately coming from Allah. This has a way and impacts the way we understand our wealth. So our wealth really is not our own absolutely. Yeah, and this has implication on property ownership and how you are supposed to spend your wealth and so on. We don't own absolutely anything. And that is why even when we pass away and we are giving inheritance, we cannot decide we want to give every part of our property to our first son. No, in Islam, because Allah is Malikul Mulk, even your own property, when you pass away, there are certain division. Certain amount goes to your son, certain amount goes to your daughter, certain amount will go to your wife, etc., etc., right? So there is a very important implication of the fact that you are not absolute owner, that Allah is the absolute owner. Al-Muqsit, equitable. When you are doing your economic transaction, you must be just. Yeah, important. And I think later when we talk about distribution, maybe somebody will talk about what it means to be just. Especially in Islamic finance, I believe today a lot of discussion about whether we want to use equity contracts or debt contracts. Yeah, and one of the asma of Allah is Al-Muqsit. Okay, so God is very present in everything we do. In modern economics, we don't talk about God in anything that we analyze and we do. There is no place, or there was no place for God or Bible in developing economics. Maybe in the early part, in the time prior to Adam Smith, and even during Adam Smith's time, religion was still an important part of the science that they were doing. But really today, no social scientist will accept the idea that when you want to develop your economics, you need to go back to the Bible. It will not be something that they do. Similarly, maybe in other religions, but certainly in Islam, we will always say our primary source of knowledge is Al-Quran and followed by Sunnah. So there is a very big difference in our view of God. So religion is central. In economics, God is also ever present in everything that we do. What about man? Of course, very, very important, because economics is a human science, is a social science. We are studying the behavior of man, right? Economics is all about man's behavior towards wealth, towards other people, right? So when we talk about man in Islam, again, I think you have done this in your IRK certificate. Man is insan, yeah. He is created good, he's fitrah, he is made of body and spirit, he is given aql and given knowledge, yeah, taught all the names, he is the best of creation, fi ahsani taqweem, and then he plays the dual role of being Abdullah and Khalifa fil ard. And both of these two roles got to be seen together. Sometimes, some of our scholars, they talk about man as Khalifa, man as Khalifa, man as Khalifa. Definitely he is Khalifa, but he is also Abdullah. So when we develop our Islamic economics, we have to develop both of these roles, not just the Khalifa part. Because sometimes if you only stress the Khalifa part without the Abd part, it may also make the Khalifa forget that, he is Abdullah. In fact, I will argue later, you cannot actually be Khalifa if you don't accept being Abdullah. Yeah? In modern economics, we talk about the rational economic man, right? Rational economic man. This rational economic man, as I mentioned just now, self-interested. And today, self-interest is equated with selfishness. And they are actually not the same. Self-interested maximizer of material satisfaction. So what does the consumer want to do? Maximize his utility. What does the firm want to do? Maximize their profit. Others' welfare, the workers, the stakeholders, the environment, this is not included in formal models of neoclassical economics. Although I have to admit, in today's new environment that we are living in, people are talking about sustainable development. Yeah, they are talking about green environment issues, and now they are starting to bring in the environment and others into the decision making. All right, and Alhamdulillah, I think this is a good development, because I think from Islamic point of view, we have been actually saying this right from 50 years ago, but at that point in time, nobody wanted to listen. But I think today, because we have the developments of SDGs and other people are talking about corporate social responsibility, therefore we can now talk about man as no longer being the selfish maximizer. Yeah, but still in modern economics, this is the formal models. They still talk about maximizing. So maybe later when our colleagues talk about consumption and production, they will tackle this issue. How do we deal with this idea that we should not only think of ourselves, but we should also think of others in our decision making? Right? So in modern economics, I think only of myself. But in Islamic economics, if I'm Abdullah and I'm Khalifa fil ard, how does that impact my decisions in consumption, in production, in how I treat people? Yeah, we need to clarify this. All right. So man is also very important. And I love this quotation by Syed Hussein Nasser. There is no more dangerous creature on earth than a Khalifa Allah who no longer considers himself to be Abdullah. And maybe in the West, this is what has happened, because they have taken away God from science. God is no longer involved in science, right? So once you take away God from science, then the science can promote the idea that man is the master. He is not the slave. But we are Abdullah. We are the slave of Allah. Abd, sometimes people use the word servant, but actually, the actual meaning of Abd is slave. We are the slaves of Allah. Right? And that is why I say, please, when we develop Islamic economics, we have to keep in mind we are Abdullah as well as Khalifa fil ard. So the Abdullah has to guide the Khalifa. Yeah. So if you forget that you are Abdullah, you can become very, very dangerous. Yeah, I think it's an important point for us to keep in mind. Okay, nature and universe. In Islam, Allah is the creator, the Khalik, and everything else is the makhluk, right? And therefore, when we talk about the universe, the nature, the world, it is a creation of Allah for man, right? And there are so many verses, and I'm just, giving you Surah Al-An'am. It talks of vegetation, fruits, night and day, heavens and earth, human beings, rain, so many different things you find in the Quran talking about the creation, which is created for man, because man is the Khalifa, man is Abdullah. Yeah? Man is going to be in control or responsible or be the trustee of the universe. So if you're the trustee, you cannot do anything you like. You have to follow the terms of the trust, right? So nature is seen as ayatullah, as a sign of God's existence. All right. Now, when we talk about nature or the world or the universe, we also accept the idea that there is the material world, the world that we see, that we are living in. There is also the alamul ghaib, the world that we cannot see. Now, I put it there because I want to stress a very important point. Economics, and I will argue even Islamic economics, is not about talking about the alam al-ghaib. Economics and Islamic economics is talking about this world. We are doing economics in this world. We are looking at the resources in this world. We are looking at human beings in this world. We are having wealth in this world. All right? Now, how does the alam ghaib come into our decision making? Basically, what we mean by universe is material world as well as world of ghaib. It means that we know that there is a world hereafter. Yeah, there is a Yawmul Akhirah, and when we die in this world, we will go to this next world. And therefore, when we say there is a world of ghaib, we need to understand that our decisions that we make in this world must also make sure that we get success not only in this world, but in the hereafter. So our decision making in this world, which is what Islamic economics is going to focus on, must recognize the world hereafter. Okay, very important for us to keep that in mind, and we must make sure that we don't confuse. Yeah, so Islamic economics is not going to be an economics that's talking about alam ghaib. Yeah, this is not the business of Islamic economics. But as a Muslim, the central worldview is there is a world in the hereafter. So if you live in this world for 70 years or 80 years, or if you are lucky longer, right? Whatever decision you make in your economic life must give you success for your 70 years in this world, but don't sacrifice your 70 years. Sorry, don't sacrifice your eternal life in the hereafter for pleasure, just for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in this world, right? So if Allah says riba is haram, then in your daily dealing in this world, you shouldn't deal with riba. If you deal with riba, you are sacrificing your hereafter, which is eternal, just for maybe you make extra money and wealth in this world, but it is based on riba, and this will give you loss in the hereafter. So a rational decision in Islamic economics will be make sure you don't have riba, even if it means that the profit of that project is less. But if it is riba based, this is not acceptable to you. It is irrational for you to take a project that has riba but gives you more material profit in this world, and you lose in your eternal life, right? So this very important. The worldview is now going to impact how you choose your projects. Okay, keep that in mind, and I hope when our colleagues discuss consumption and production, they will talk about this in greater detail, inshallah. Okay, so let's move, and my slide is, yeah. In modern economics, because of that secularization process, so if you read Professor Alatas, when he talked about this process of Islam and secularism, he discussed secularization, and he was commenting on this book by Harvey Cox, The Secular City, and he talked about secularization process. And this secularization process is made up of different components: the desacralization of politics, disenchantment of nature, and there was the third one, the deconsecration of values. All values become relative. Okay, man is the master of the world, and what is good today, tomorrow may not be necessary, may not be considered to be good, and therefore I can actually do whatever I want because man is the master. Yeah. So desacralization of politics. You take away authority from God, you give it to man. This is one of the elements that Harvey Cox talked about in the process of secularization, which Professor Alatas has elaborated wonderfully and applied it from an Islamic perspective. All right. For a science, only this visible world is real and relevant. Yeah, and that is why in modern economics, they are talking about maximizing profit. And that profit is meant as material profit. They are not talking about the profit that you will get in the hereafter, right? In Islamic economics, yes, we want to make profit, but we have to remember whatever we do, make sure we don't lose in the hereafter. Aim in life. Now, in modern economics, as I mentioned, the aim is to maximize material gain in this world. So all your models, no matter how sophisticated they are, it will be, even if they are long-term models, they are still talking about yourself or your company in this world. In Islamic economics, what is our goal in life, our aim in life? We want to achieve, as stated in the Quran, falah, ultimate success. How do we do this? Our entire purpose in this world is to perform ibadah. Whether it is ibadah khusus or ibadah umum. And by ibadah umum, we are including economics. How we transact, the projects that we do, the wealth that we obtain, how we use that wealth. Yeah, all of this, if we do it with right intention, with right knowledge, and with right action, it is considered to be ibadah. Okay? And economics also requires us to develop the earth to achieve God's pleasure. Yeah, mardatillah. In order to do this, Imam Al-Ghazali talks about the different means, yeah, the fadila, the fadail. We have four, as mentioned by Imam Al-Ghazali: fadilah nafsiyah, fadilah jismiyah, fadilah kharijiyah, and fadilah tawfiqiyah. And economics comes under kharijiyah, wealth. So having wealth is better than not having wealth, because if you have wealth, you can actually do things, right? So there are so many verses in the Quran, there are many verses in the very many hadith that talk about the importance of, giving zakat, and you don't pay zakat unless you have the wealth. The hand that gives is better than the hand that receives. Right? So having wealth is one of the means for you to achieve falah. But wealth alone is not going to be enough if you don't have iman, if you don't have good character. All right? And of course, if you're having a healthy body, If you have strength rather than weakness, that is better for you because you can do more. If you have a long life, it is better than short life because in a long life, you can do more ibadah. Of course, if you have a long life and you are not doing good things, better to have short life. but generally speaking, ceteris paribus, a long life is better than short life. All right. Now, even if you have all the first three, we still always make dua to Allah. Please give us tawfiq. Please give us hidayah. Please, give us the barakah so that all our ibadah is accepted. Yeah? This is fadilah tawfiqiyah, divine grace. So we work for number 1, number 2, number 3, and we ask Allah to give us number 4. And if Allah gives number 4, this means we are blessed. Yeah, and falah is there. Okay, but in order to do this, we need knowledge and action. Just by having iman alone is not enough. We need the knowledge and then we need the action. So iman, amal must go together and based on ilm, right? So all of them go together, knowledge and action. I think, again, you have done this in your IRK source, so I don't need to repeat it. It's very, very important. Ilm is, Islam is probably the religion that stresses ilm the most, right? Many times in the Quran, ilm and its derivatives appear. It is a obligatory requirement, fard, yeah. Some knowledge is fardu ain, and some knowledge fardu kifayah. Our sources of knowledge. Remember, I gave a quotation earlier that people differ because of their sources of knowledge. Now, as far as Islam is concerned and Islamic economics is concerned, our sources of knowledge will be revelation. And in the writings of scholars, they say revelation is a primary source. And then the universe is a secondary source. Some people say reason is also another source of knowledge. Others just say revelation and universe. Reason is a means of acquiring. Okay, we don't want to quibble with this. But even if we accept reason as a secondary source, what I want to stress here is this. When we say primary and secondary, we don't want to give the relationship as if secondary is less important than primary. This is not the relationship between primary and secondary. How should we understand the relationship between primary and secondary? It is something like primary school and secondary school. Okay? Nobody will say that secondary school is less important than primary, or that primary school is more important than secondary school. No. Right? What do you mean by primary, secondary? It means that the secondary school and education is built on the primary. Yeah, if you don't know how to read or write, which you do in primary school, then you cannot do the details in physics and chemistry and economics in secondary school or in university. So let's keep that understanding between primary and secondary. The universe, our akal, is based on what is stated in Revelation. So it is not that it is less important, but it is just something that has to be guided always and based on Revelation. All right, I hope this will be sufficient to move. And action, very important, because economics is action as well. Economics is just not knowledge. Economics is not just the discipline called economics. We do economics every day in our life. We decide what to buy. We decide how we deal with other people. Yeah, we get our income. We spend our income. So it is action. All right. Now, good action is ibadah. Yeah, good action is ibadah. Good economic action is ibadah. What qualifies as good action? If it has correct intention, correct knowledge, and of course, correct practice. And when we do it in this, with correct intention, correct knowledge, etc., we are meeting the Sharia requirements, the guidance that Allah has given. And therefore, our economic actions can be part of our ibadah. Okay, so it's important for us to keep in mind that when we do our economics, it is seen as part of that ibadah umum. Why? Because that's the purpose of our life in this world. It is to perform ibadah to Allah. Now, why we perform that ibadah, this is maybe a subject of another course. We don't need to do. Now, I hope I have spent, almost 1 hour talking about this and showing you that the Islamic worldview is actually different from the worldview of modern economics. Islamic economic worldview, there are differences, big differences with the modern economics worldview. And therefore, according to what we had said just now, there is a basis, there is a case for Islamic economics. All right. And I think this is very, 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 very important. All right. Now, let me just finish with another 15 minutes or so. And then I will open for some, Q&A from all of you. What is economics? Okay. Once we have established that there is a basis for Islamic economics. Why? Because the underlying worldview is different. And we consider that it is very important for us to have an alternative, because the current system is not able to be sustainable, right? And I think the developments in the last 30-40 years clearly show that we need an alternative, and for us that alternative is Islamic economics. Now, what is it? Firstly, economics deals with production, consumption, distribution, finance, exchange. This is economics. I always tell in class, if you walk by, and then you find a book on the table, and the book doesn't have a cover, so you do not know what the book is. You start opening the pages. When you read the pages, immediately you should know whether this is economics or not. So if that book has chapters that talk about producer behavior, consumer behavior, market structure, externalities, role of government, inflation, this is economics. But if you read a book that starts with a recipe how to cook a soup, this is not economics, right? So we must be clear whether we are talking about economics or Islamic economics. The scope of our subject must be dealing with economics, right? So the topics that we are doing in this course that will come after this, next week, for the next 10, 11 weeks, it is economics. And therefore, it is important for us to keep in mind that Islamic economics deals with economics. It doesn't deal with something that is in some other subject matter. It doesn't deal with fiqh mu'amalat. Now, I'm saying this because in banking today, Islamic banking today, it seems as if the Islamic part is the fiqh part. And I want to correct this. The Islamic part about Islamic finance is not only the fiqh part, it is the finance part. The Islamic part about Islamic economics is not the fiqh part. It's not the mu'amalat part in economics. It is the economics part of economics. That means Islamic economics is for production, for consumption, for distribution, for market structure. It is not just the fiqh rules. It is not just the hukum, the halal, the haram. No. In fact, I will even argue, for Islamic economics, our decisions don't have to talk about the haram. This is the job of the fuqaha. Let the fuqaha determine what is halal, what is haram. Economics is all about choosing the best within the halal domain. So in production, we don't have to bother, is this halal or haram? It is already given to us. Should be lah. Yeah, unfortunately, I think we are still talking about what is halal, what is haram. It's okay. We are still developing the discipline. But actually, economics, Islamic economics should be focusing on how we make the best decisions within the halal domain. Okay? Now, due to relative scarcity, and believe me, this is another topic we can discuss one whole day or week talking about scarcity. Do we have scarcity or not? But I would like to just say there is relative scarcity, even from an Islamic point of view. We may understand it differently. We have to make choices. Even in Islamic economics, you cannot get everything you want. You will have to make choice. All right? And we want to make good choices. Remember, ibadah is good action. We want to make good choices, correct choices. We want to make the best choice. That is what economics is all about, right? So once you are given, this is the halal domain. Between A or B or C, we want to choose the best. This is Islamic economics. How we choose between the different halal options, not to choose the lowest denominator. Why? Because it is halal. Yes, of course, it is halal, but there is something better. Economics wants you to choose the better option. All right? Now, this especially in the case of banking finance, I think we have been arguing for a long time about murabaha and mudarabah and a lot of argument. Yeah. So we are not talking about whether murabaha is halal or haram. Even if it is halal, we still want to choose which is the better option. And not just continue murabaha. 99% of all transaction murabaha. Why? Because, this is the one that gives the banks profit. We want to choose the better option, the best option, not only for the bank, but also for all stakeholders, right? This is the job of economists. Yeah. I think, unfortunately, in the last 30, 40 years, economists have not been involved in banking finance enough. Yeah. We have left banking and finance to the bankers and to the Sharia advisors, and they have been focusing on the fiqh approach to banking. We need to talk about making the best choice within the halal domain. This will be Islamic economics. All right. Now, I'm just, some broad definitions of economics, just for those of you who have no background. The third definition is the standard definition that we use in modern economics today in our textbooks by Lionel Robbins. Economics is a science which studies human behavior. So human beings, important, as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. So you have scarce means and you have certain ends that you want to achieve, and therefore you have to make choices. So even in modern economics, the idea is making choice. Islamic economics also about making choice, but our choices are determined by our value system. Right? Our interaction in order to produce that economics is based on our social system, our social laws, our culture, right? And therefore, worldview is very, very important. So again, I go back to my earlier point. Our economics needs to be determined by Islamic worldview, by the Sharia, by our sources of knowledge. That is going to influence our decision making. What is Islamic economics? Okay, now to put it in context, it is part of deen. It is part of the religion, because religion is a complete way of life. It deals with production, consumption, distribution, exchange, finance, and so on. Yeah. but it must be according to Islamic worldview. We want to make choices according to Islam. And of course, because the job scope of economics is not just theory, right? We want to describe something, we analyze the problem, and then we make prescription, right? You go to the doctor tells you you have a headache, you have fever, and then stop. No, the doctor has to prescribe something. Please take Panadol or please whatever, right? So economics also, we describe the problem, we try to answer why the problem occurs, and then we try to solve it. So it must involve, all of these stages must involve Islamic criteria, the Sharia criteria. And again, I want to stress, the Sharia criteria is not only the fiqh criteria. Sharia is much more than fiqh. All right, some definitions of Islamic economics. I've just chosen a few. There is an article that Dr. Hafaz and me wrote about the subject matter of Islamic economics. I think we give many more, so please refer. My definition that I gave, many years ago, Islamic economics is the approach to and process of interpreting and solving man's economic problems based on the values, norms, laws, and institutions found in and derived from the sources of Islam or the Sharia. Okay, now that's maybe important to break it down. In the FIE class, we actually break down and go one by one. And then Islamic finance, in order to finance the economic activity, we need to have institutions using instruments according to rules and regulations, which are all bound by the Sharia. So finance is supposed to facilitate real economic activity. I think everyone will agree, right? The problem with finance is sometimes it is not connected to the real economic activity. So we agree with that. John Maynard Keynes, another I love the quotation by Maynard Keynes. He was saying that the relationship of money to the economy. Yeah? He said money to the economy is like oil to the engine, the black oil, the engine oil. Yeah? Money to the economy is like oil to the engine. Why do we need money? Because it helps to facilitate real economic activity. So money to the economy is like oil to the engine. Why do you need the oil in the engine? So that the engine moves smoothly. But you cannot focus on the oil all the time. Unfortunately, in the world today, we talk about the oil, we talk about the oil, we talk about the oil. We spend hours and publications written on the oil, on money, on banking, on finance. But we don't talk enough about what the finance is for. Yeah? So hopefully this certificate in Islamic economics will try to talk about the engine, the economy, the real economic activity, and why finance needs to be serving the economy. Some unique features of Islamic economics. Firstly, Islamic economics and Islamic finance have the central position of revelation, the Quran and the Sunnah as ultimate authority. So the source of knowledge, very important. This makes Islamic economics, Islamic finance different from conventional economics and finance. The Quran is known as Al-Furqan. It is, even Allah is telling us that the Quran is supposed to be the criterion for you in all your decision making. The Sharia is a total guidance for man. It should not be limited to the law or legal aspect. For economics, the ethical dimension is very important. And I think later there will be a discussion on ethics and why it's important. How do we use the Quran and the Sunnah and the works of scholars in the process of developing Islamic economics and finance? We need to use the aql, but correctly through the process of ijtihad. Okay. So if I go back to that definition, Islamic economics is an approach to and process of. So it is an approach that we take. It is a process that we have to undergo. We interpret the economic problems. We then solve the economic problems. How do we solve it? It has to be based on the values, the norms, the laws, and institution. Now, keep in mind, yeah, it's not only the law. Yeah? So I talk about values, I talk about norms, I talk about institutions and laws. Either you find it directly in the sources of Islam, riba is haram. You find it directly in the Quran. Or you have to derive. Sometimes you're not going to find all the detailed solutions in the Quran, so you have to derive from the sources. All right. Most economic applications will have to be derived. In order to derive correctly, we need to understand the Islamic worldview, especially the Islamic vision of economics, so that the Islamic or the Sharia boundary of economics can be determined. The Sharia must be interpreted and applied. This is what ijtihad is, right? You interpret and apply. Sharia, you interpret it to develop fiqh. Fiqh, again, not understood only as law. Yeah? I may even argue muamalat is also, economics is also fiqh. I look at the Quran, I look at the Sunnah, I look at the other secondary sources, I develop economics. This is interpreting the Sharia components into the discipline called economics, right? And then through a certain methodology in order to develop models and theories. Now, I believe this part will be handled by our next speaker, Dr. Mahyudi, who will be talking about methodology and about why ethics is important. I think that's it. Okay, these are some very limited references. Please refer to the Foundation of Islamic Economics. There will be a textbook, inshallah, coming out soon. I hope everybody may be able to get access to that, called Foundations of Islamic Economics. In the time being, I think I will stop here. And if there is, it's 10:34 now. Maybe 10 minutes, if you don't mind, we can extend a little bit because we started a little late. So welcome for any questions that you may have. Wallahu alam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, let me quickly see if there are some questions. I think there are maybe a few. I don't know if somebody can also. Okay, I'm just going to take. There's just a lot of salam here, so let me just go down and see if there's a question. Sorry, there is a question here. Can this course be done through Facebook? I think yes. Yeah, please. Okay, that's still. Yeah, it's still all salams.
Bro, go to the bottom, bro.
Yes, at the bottom.
Go to the bottom.
Right at the bottom. Okay, I'm going down. Okay, well, there's a very long one here. Okay, in Islam, we believe in the multiplex reality, that is physical existence, then non-material existence, and divine existence. Whereas the Western philosophy, I cannot get this. Okay, hold on. Western philosophy, I can't get the question because it doesn't come out. Whereas the Western philosophy is reductionist and focus on, and then I lose the question after that. Focus on.
Can freeze it, bro. Just click on the question. It will freeze.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I don't seem to get it. Maybe Sharan, can you read the
Let
question?
me read the question.
Yeah,
Okay, bro. Go ahead.
Yeah. In Islam, we believe in multiplex reality, that is physical existence or materialism, then non-material existence, idealism, and divine existence, revelations. Whereas the Western philosophy as a selfish being who maximizes his benefit. Is it true to say that we need Islamic economic as an alternative is because of the emancipations of modern economics from ethics and because of holistic worldview that Islam offers? So that's the question.
The short answer is yes. The long question, the
Uh,
answer is yes, right? I mean, definitely that is one of the important reasons why we talk about Islamic economics. Actually, even in the West and in globally, there are many people who also feel that there is importance for us to look at a holistic view. But our holistic view, of course, as you mentioned, will be based on our view of how we view the universe and resources, etc. Our challenge, of course, is how to develop it. I think everybody may agree with this, but how do you develop a contemporary discipline called Islamic economics that is able to represent, yeah, all the things that we want? I think this is the challenge. Okay. Next question: is it true Islamic banking nowadays still use the capitalist models of calculating hibah formula? Are there alternatives? As far as Islamic banking, I will leave it to the person who's going to speak on banking to answer. But are there alternatives? Of course, there are many alternatives to Islamic banking. One of the things that is very clear today is the banking that dominates in Islamic banking is commercial banking. Yeah, commercial banking. But today, for the last 15, 20 years, we also have something called social banking, right? It has come as an alternative banking, which wants to provide funding for those who commercial banks don't provide capital. So it's another form of banking. We can also talk about non-banking finance. Why only banking, right? We can talk about cooperatives. Cooperatives is one of those things that are really not discussed a lot. Why? Because the performance of cooperatives sometimes has not been very good, and because the performance is bad, people think it's a bad option. But that is another option. We have the capital market with sukuk playing a very important role. So I think there are many different institutions that we can look at. Yes, we are still in the framework of the capitalist system. A little bit more difficult. So I think somebody is going to talk about economic systems, maybe if not next week, the week after. Maybe they will explain a little bit more detail on this. Yeah. Your emphasis on our economic system should be determined in Sharia, but how do you adopt this notion in Malaysia since this country is embedded? Is embedded or secular system? Seek your valuable view. Yeah, of course, not only Malaysia, but I think all countries, maybe we are affected by our history. And when you talk about adopting the Sharia, then different countries will have different approaches. I believe now in Pakistan, if anybody is following the latest developments, there was a kind of instruction or decision made by the Federal Sharia Court telling that the government should move to a riba-free system, not only banking but riba-free system in 5 years, right? And so their Pakistan situation is there is a Federal Sharia Court that has like instructed, yeah, how effective or how much weight that will be. We will have to see. But in all countries, this is a challenge. In the case of Malaysia, of course, it's even more challenging because we have a good big size of non-Muslim population, and therefore the way that we go about moving to a Islamic economic system is something that must keep in mind, that Islamic economics, Islamic banking, Islamic finance must be for everyone, not only for Muslims. We have to be able to present Islamic economics and banking and finance as the preferred choice of everybody. And how do you do that? You have to show that Islamic economics, Islamic banking works. We can have certificate after certificate, we can talk for hours and years. Practice and success in that practice is the best education. If you can show that it works, people will follow you. So it is our duty, right, to make sure that we can show Islamic economics works. How is it going to be put into practice? This will depend on the country. If you're in Iran, if you're in Pakistan, it may be a different way of implementing. In Malaysia, a different way. In Indonesia, a different way, right? Because we have our own history, we have our own context. How does Islamic economics and finance answer the problem of scarcity in the money supply? I'm not sure. Do we have scarcity in the money supply? I will maybe leave this question to the person who's going to talk about money and banking or monetary policy. Yeah, but let me just say in general that the whole issue of money is an important issue in Islamic economics. There are many actually, who are very, very concerned about our current way money is created through the fractional reserve banking system. One of the critics that I happen to support a lot, and it actually came from one of our scholars in the 1980s, Omar Chapra, one of the pioneers of Islamic economics. When we were reviewing his 1985 book, Towards a Just Monetary System, he asked a very important question. He said, we put money in the banks, okay, and then the banks loan it out, right? We learned this in standard economics, right? So it's our money, the banks loan it out, and yet the bank keeps the majority profit to the bank. So our money, but we just get a small return. The bank, and maybe even the bank management and bank shareholders, they get the big amounts of money. Not to mention the top management will get big returns. But what is it that the people get? Because it's their money in the banks, right? So he was saying that we need to devise a new system where we also share the profit of the bank with the people, not just the return they give, the small return, but more than that. All right. Now, that was Omar Chapra in 1980s. More recently, I believe Richard Werner has written a book on how money is created, and he argues that actually the bank doesn't need your money to give out loans. They create the money from just the deposit, the debit, credit, the asset liability thing. They create money. So private banks are creating money, and of course, in the process, profiting, right? So what is an Islamic view of that? Okay, some people are talking about gold and silver. I'm not necessarily a supporter of only gold and silver. I have no problem gold and silver, but I do believe we can reform the current system. Maybe like how Omar Chapra is proposing, or how Prof. Abbas Mirajo is proposing. We can improve the current system. Can we have your slides? I think the organizers are making the slides available to everybody. Is choosing halal not the best choice? Sorry. Is choosing halal not the best choice of economic behavior in maximizing satisfaction in the long run? So that the halal choice should be the best. Oh, yes, of course. But what is halal, and how do you determine that halal? That is the details that we need to work out. There's a lot of investment application this 21st century. How can some as Muslim identify halal investment site? Oh, I think this is beyond my investment side. Maybe Prof. Gairu knows more about the internet. I have to say, I'm a little bit backward in this. Can individual embark on establishing Islamic finance house? Again, I think I leave it to people who are going to talk about Islamic banking and finance. Maybe I think that's about it. So I maybe aim in life. What's the difference between influence versus having cables? Yeah, as I keep telling my students, I make them make a promise every year that they are not going to be the cables. Yeah, we have too many people who want to get finance, or want to get money, or want to get wealth just by doing middleman job. Yeah, so middleman is not something that that we should be encouraging in Islamic economics. In fact, I would even go to the extent this middleman job is unearned gain. You are gaining by doing nothing really necessary. I can go directly to the source, but I use a cable. I use intermediary. Unearned gain, and that is what raises the cost of everything. It should be eliminated from the system. Yeah, so I think we need to be. That's another very interesting area. So Robert, you should do a master's or undergraduate thesis in this area and try to figure out, yeah, how to kill the influence and cables. All right, I think I hand this back to Prof. Gairu. If there's anything that is not right, my apologies, it comes from me, and inshallah, what is worthwhile comes from Allah. Wallahu alam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Prof. Aslam. It's already 10, I think it's 10:45. Because later on we are going to have another session. I think what we can have is, can we have about, let's see, 30-minute breaks, and then we'll start back at 11:15 for everyone, so that everyone will can take a break after 1.5 hours of lectures. Meanwhile, I think we can save all the question and see whether we'll be able to answer, whether online or something. We can try to figure out, because there are about 40-50 questions for Prof. Aslam. Okay, so I guess we can thank you everyone. We'll come back at 11:15.
Okay, Prof. Thank
Assalamualaikum.
you. Assalamualaikum. We'll meet again in 25 minutes. Inshallah.
Everyone loves spreadsheets. Actually, they don't. But check this out. Okay, Monday.com, get started, import.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Can you hear? Can you see the screen?
Yes. Nanti after this apa namanya lah, the presentation mode.
Presentation mode. Okay. Presentation mode. Just
after this lah nanti when you want to start. Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Can you... Ada delay, eh? It seems to be
no,
delay.
No, that one is YouTube. I forgot to turn off to mute YouTube.
YouTube delay a bit, eh?
YouTube delay just a few seconds.
Yeah, true. Okay. Presentation mode, eh? Yeah.
Nah, dah presentation mode dah. It's already presentation.
Dah kan?
Okay. Yep. Tadi maybe a little bit delay.
Okay.
Okay, bismillah. Things. Okay, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So it's already 11:15. I hope everyone are back from their break. Okay, so now we have a new presenter, Dr. Mohamed Mahyudi from the Departments of Economics. He's going to present on two topics. The first one is on the methodology of Islamic economics, and the second one is on Islamic ethics. Okay. So I guess I would like to give the session to Dr. Mahyudi.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Professor Azmi, for introducing me. So inshallah, we will continue with this online certificate program. And for my part, inshallah, I will be talking on two topics. And the first one is methodology of Islamic economics. And the other one is Islamic.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so let me just start with dua. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله اللهم نور قلوبنا بنور يدك كما نورت الله بنور شمسك أبدا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى سيدنا محمد الحمد لله رب العالمين آمين يا رب العالمين. So alhamdulillah, first and foremost, I wish to welcome all of you for this online certificate program. And alhamdulillah, we have Professor Aslam earlier on. He talked about why Islamic economics and what is Islamic economics. These are two big topics, looking at the very reason why we have to be interested in Islamic economics. So he also talked about that how in the end, whatever knowledge called economics is one that is supposed to also be viewing the aspect of action. After all, in the case of Islamic economics, we view any kind of amal, any kind of good intended and well prescribed actions as ibadah, inshallah. Okay, so in view of the first session by Professor Aslam just now, we will now proceed to this topic of methodology of Islamic economics first. Then after 45 minutes, I will later turn to the other topic and that is Islamic ethics. So before I proceed to the details of this methodology topic, I wish to also just to give a broad picture of what this two topics is all about. First, the methodology is about looking at it from the knowledge aspect, mainly the knowledge aspect. How do you build knowledge? How do you actually try to look at what is the means and the ways to actually increase the stock of knowledge? Okay, the stock of knowledge of interest for our online course is actually Islamic economics. So That is why we have to look at the means, we have to look at the question of epistemology in general, which I will elaborate later. The second part, or the second topic, is on the ethics. So the ethics that of interest, again, it is actually related to economics, whether we want to talk about it in the sphere of action called consumption, production, or even distribution. And later I will try to zoom in a particular action so that we can have a means to actually later on apply it ourselves. So in the end, whatever action comes about from knowledge and will. This is the basic theory of action. It comes from knowledge and will. So once we have knowledge, proper knowledge on what is an action is, you need to have the desire. You need to have the intent and initiative to work on what you want to achieve. So this is where the whole action will come about, whether you want to buy something or whether you want to be in this online session. You must have some certain knowledge about the program, and you have the will to join the program. So that is why you are here today. And basically, the action of yours of being online session, because of these two factors, knowledge and will. Okay. So the second part, Islamic ethics, will look at the principles that will allow us to be the Islamic actor that we wish to be, and we are supposed to be. Okay, so these are the scope of my presentation for today. So the first part is methodology of Islamic economics. Okay, Bismillah. I'm assuming that all of you can hear me well, because I've basically tested it with Prof Gairu just now, Gairu Azmi just now. So Alhamdulillah, the team. So let me proceed, presentation outline. So I will then zoom into the introduction, after which in the introduction I will put some caveats, some qualifiers, some objectives, so that you can follow through with the rest of the content easier. Okay, so that is the first part, and then the second part will be looking at the disciplines. Actually, it will be on theory of knowledge, epistemology, what we call epistemology. It is a high-sounding word, epistemology, but in simple terms, it actually means theory of knowledge. Okay, I will mention to you some basics on what is this theory of knowledge is all about, and how it is connected to Islamic economics. Where lies the concern? Why are we supposed to be interested in this theory of knowledge, the broad picture about theory of knowledge. And then part 3 will then zoom into the 3 different disciplines, of 4, or how you see it. It's basically the economics discipline and also the Islamic sciences. So you have at the moment the economics science that we come to know, and Dr. Prof. Aslam just now mentioned about neoclassical economics, and I guess that is the form of and substance of economics that we are most familiar of. And of course, then we have the Sharia part, which looks into the fiqh and usul fiqh dimensions, and we will try to make a connection of all 3 for us to get that whole idea that Islamic economics is an integrated science. Islamic economics requires us to have this interdisciplinary approach in trying to really have full effect on the society. Okay, so it is not an isolated case. So you have Islamic economics totally silent on fiqh, totally silent on economics. Either or, it will be a wrong case if you were to present Islamic economics as such. Okay, and then we look at the broad tasks. Unfortunately, the time will not allow me to actually elaborate on the whole spectrum of how Islamic economists do their work, but at least that overall task is to be appreciated. And this is where we are taking the approach of trying to be inclusive, looking at what Islamic economists have been doing all along. Okay, and then we will try to just conclude. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, so the qualifiers, first and foremost, methodology is part of epistemology. Okay, methodological discussion is actually part of epistemology. Epistemology is that theory of knowledge. So we have our own experiences in our life. We have been doing a lot. We have studied a lot. We have gathered a lot in terms of our own daily experiences, and all that will have effect on the way we perceive things, the way we present the worldview, the way we conceptualize certain issues and topic and frame those issues and topics to something that is aligned to our Islamic worldview, or perhaps any other worldview that you can talk of, like scientific worldview. There are people who subscribe to the scientific worldview. There are people who also subscribe to the philosophical worldview, looking at how we can talk about reason as the ultimate judgment of what is knowledge. So epistemology is, again, a high-sounding sound. It is a philosophy of knowledge. It is theory of knowledge. It is about the nature of knowledge. It is about the sources of knowledge. It is also about the limitations of knowledge, or limitations of knowledge, limitations of method, limitations of sources. The sources itself, what are the limitations? So it is actually a broad discussion, and this is where I think we have to take note of how simple are we trying to cover it in this online certificate program. Okay, so it is about theory of knowledge, and as I said, I put there increased awareness because each one of us have our own experiences on how do you treat knowledge. After all, we've been functioning all this while. It is from what we know, basically. And whatever we act upon all this while must have come from what we know. What we know can come from several sources, which we will cover later. Okay. And then nature of economics, Sharia, fiqh, and fiqh, usul fiqh. Now, I mentioned just now, Islamic economics is a hybrid project. I like to use the word hybrid, simply because it is of that nature. It is of that nature, and by that you can make an analogy of hybrid cars. It takes years before we can have that technology of hybrid technology. So for that reason, you have to actually think about the alternative sources of energy. You have to also think about the fuel energy, and you combine the two, synthesize the two. Only then you can have hybrid technology. So similarly here, you have the wealth of experience from conventional economics. You have much more from the Islamic sciences, because when we talk about Islamic sciences, we can talk about it from the advent of sciences, Islamic sciences, fiqh, usul fiqh, and this comes at the 2nd century of Hijrah. So you can see the development of sciences of Sharia, fiqh, and usul fiqh developing up until today. So by that you can also make sure we have to know, we have to be sensitive to the Turath, to the wealth of Islamic legacy, Islamic sciences that we have in the form of ilmu sharia, ilmu fiqh, and usul fiqh. So this is where I guess you can tap into your course of what do you call that? The other online course, fiqh and usul fiqh by the IIIT. Okay, so understand. Basically, then you can then understand why is it that it seems like we have a bit of economics, we have a bit of fiqh, we have a bit of usul fiqh. Then after this development of increase, know, and understand, I think in the end you will find at peace why we do things the way we do. Okay, so in the end, it is about what does Islamic economics do. So that is the whole picture of this topic. Okay, I'm just checking on the time. I have 27 slides, inshallah, I'll cover it in due time. So, Bismillah, method and methodology. I have to make a clarification first and foremost, because there is a lot of confusion. This is about clarification of terms. We try to clarify what is this method and what is this methodology. So method is just a systematic arrangement, ordering of thoughts in a way appropriate to investigation. So you have a certain thing to investigate. Then you want to do it. You want to gather information. What method do you apply? So for instance, we have this online course. Then the organizer would like to know the satisfaction or the quality of our course. So if that is the case, then perhaps one way is for the organizer to give out surveys, online surveys for the participants to fill it out. And then from there, you can question on where lies the sources of quality. It could be in terms of content. It could be in terms of delivery. It can also be in terms of the resource person. It can be also in terms of the timing, the structure, and all these kind of details can be asked in that survey. And that survey is a method. Okay, that survey is a method. Okay, so it is about that research technique and the way you reason out why this question is specifically useful for this in this particular method, and so on and so forth. That is something what method is all about. It's about the tools. In the end, with the method, you get data, and you get information. You get that raw input, so to say, raw input for you to work on, for the researcher, for the Islamic economist to work on. Methodology is a bit more advanced. I mean, the discussion here is one that is more advanced in the sense that methodology is logia. And first, we appreciate the structure of the word methodology. So logi means it's a combination of logic and also method. So it's logia, the study of method. So it is actually a second order. If you treat method as the first order discussion, okay, about the tools, the different tools available, okay, then methodology is that second order discussion, abstraction, a more philosophical discussion, a more not to say investigative, analytical. Analytical. It is more analytical for us to be talking about methodology. Okay, so it is that knowledge that looks at the quality as a whole, quality as a whole, the alternative methods there, and we try to look at the strengths of each method and try to then have the evaluative position of if this is the method, if this is the unit of analysis, what is the suitable method there? If this is the objective and purpose of the inquiry or investigation, what is then the right methodology and method to be used there? Okay, so it could be qualitative, it could be quantitative, and all that is a more philosophical, so to say, philosophical. And of course, in this talk, in this point about methodology, we have to look at the question of standards. What standards do you put? What kind of skepticism that we can entertain? What kind of inquiry on quality of sources that we can raise up? Okay, so if you a survey, then you know it's a what do you call this? It's a raw data that comes from the recipient. It's more perceptive, and this is where a level of subjectivity would come in. And as for the organizer, they have to, or whoever is the researcher there, need to be sensitive to the biases in the method involved in any discussion. So that inquiry will, the inquiry on standards, and the inquiry on standards of truth is something that is the discussion of methodology. So Alhamdulillah, on the topic of methodology and epistemology, after 40 years of development in Islamic banking and finance and also economics, Islamic economics, I observe there is a greater interest among Islamic economists on this more philosophical topic, partly because of people like Prof. Aslam and brother Dr. Hafaz Furqani have been harping on this issue to look at more philosophical foundation in among Islamic economists' work. Okay, so this is where part 2 is. The definition is something that is that's what I'm highlighting here, simply because that this is the end game. This is the ultimate arrival that we want to have. Practically speaking, practically speaking, of course, when we talk about any objective in the Islamic actions, it must be for the sake of Allah, mardatillah, and falah. You cannot escape from this ultimate the objective. But to be more specific in terms of the discussion here, Islamic economics, then we can look at the definition here. Alhamdulillah, I have heard the explanation of this definition from Professor Aslam several times, including just now. I was a student before. So Alhamdulillah, so just now also he broke down the definition to allow us to actually know that in the end we have to come back to the sources of knowledge in Islam. This is what I mean by an epistemological emphasis. There are so many definitions. It could be more than 30 definitions of Islamic economics, but I just have to choose those which are having a certain emphasis on concern about epistemology. Concern about epistemology. And I'm not saying this is the only two. I'm just saying that this is the one that I can elaborate well, given that first, I learned from Professor Aslam himself on this definition, how, yes, we have the sources and you want to actually solve man's economic problem. Okay, it is actually practical science, and we want to actually deal with real issues of inflation, deal with real issues of unemployment, underdevelopment, and so on. Okay, but how do you do that? You have to actually then tap into the values, tap into the norms, tap into the laws and institutions that are there, that have been discussed in what we call sources of knowledge in Islam. And the legacy of Islamic Torah must be appreciated. The fact that the primary source of Quran and Sunnah must be appreciated. We need to go back to that and try to be looking at how we can derive deeper understanding with the proper sciences, of course, the sciences of Al-Quran, the sciences of Hadith, which we can learn from the Kuliah of Islamic Liberal Knowledge and Human Sciences. Okay, as for this second one, after 30 years of, or rather 20 years, then I have tried to look at it from my own perspective. And this is where I have tried to really understand what Islamic economists have been doing all along. So what I gather from the peers and the teachers that I hang around with, got the chance to learn from them that this is what they have been doing all along. Okay, they have actually applied the Quranic framework. Quranic framework here is that epistemological component in this definition or description of Islamic economics. Okay, and then we study anyone. We study anyone. We study any society. So in the height of financial crisis in 2007, 2008, you have Islamic economists looking at what were the factors on those issues. So clearly it is a it originated from Western society, capitalistic society, and yet we study it. We don't think that it is just a case for the Westerners, a case for the conventional economics. That is not the case. So basically, when Islamic economists study that, they apply the Quranic framework. They talk about the role of justice. They talk about how certain instruments are actually exploiting the system, the society, the consumers, the clients, the swap products and so on. All this just risk shifting or risk transferring of one financial institution to another. So all that creates that burgeoning money economy, or rather paper economy that is there in this in the wake of the crisis. Okay, so why do we do that? It is in the end we know that every society try to do some improvement in terms of their welfare. They try to be better off than before. So that is the way I present Islamic economics. Okay. Okay. So what is then the identity and motive of analysis? I like to bring some recent articles, and here, alhamdulillah, we have this Susanto, a recent paper looking at new Islamic economic framework. New Islamic economic framework. I mean, it is titled as such. So I assume he brings out his observation on wealth of literature provided by Islamic economics. So what does he come to? He basically come to the position that economics must or could be having that label Islamic if it relies upon the ontological and epistemological foundations, which are consistent with the Islamic worldview. So perhaps some of you will say, wow, this is what is ontology, what is epistemology? And this is where I like to actually normalize these words, normalize these philosophical words. Once we normalize it, it becomes, I mean, people will not be afraid of these words. Ontology is a study of existence and being, a study of mawjudats, mawjud, makdum, wujud, basically about wujud, existence, about existence. It is about, maybe some things are wujud zihni, wujud khariji, it exists externally, and also some abstract notions exist internally in our mind. So this is where we have to appreciate the broad spectrum of what exists. So just now I heard one question about multiplex reality. Multiplex reality is just an appreciation of how we have alam shahada, and also the ghaib, the unseen, seen and unseen reality. So these are the what exists, and we as Islamic economists treat existence in terms of what truly exists in terms of khariji, externally, but also we have the ghaibiyats, we have also the ghaib, things which are unseen, which are part of reality. We don't deny that. So if you bring that understanding, then we can appreciate revelation. This is where it connects to the question of epistemology. Once you know that God exists, then revelation is real. Revelation is something that is talking about the truth. Okay, so that's why Islamic economics must have this identity, ontology and epistemology, okay, which are consistent with the Islamic worldview, the way we look at things, the way we look at reality. So that is the identity, but the motive part, are we doing it just for the sake of another academic exercise? That is the question here. And the answer is no. We want to transform the economy. We want to transform the society. We want to also transform the individual. Okay, so that is the motive of the Islamic economics knowledge, transformative part. Okay, in the end, we want to see development in the way Islamic development is defined. I believe later there will be discussion on economic systems and also development. What is knowledge? Knowledge is, Bismillah. So what is knowledge? Ilm. What is ilm? You have that standard definition, what in short we call JTB, justified true belief. And in the case of At-Tarifat, Jurjani, most famous definition, or rather the most famous book of definition, At-Tarifat. We have a student translating this and do a commentary on this Tarifat, and he get a PhD from ISTAC, IIUM. So that's how monumental is this Kitab At-Tarifat. Okay. So it is about the confirmed belief that conforms to reality. So we are interested in reality, but then it is in the form of seen and unseen. That is the reality that we are talking about in the case of Islamic view on ilm. What we are interested in is actually truth claims. Okay, if you have economics and you claim certain proposition, you say that when price increase, then you have lesser quantity demanded. So that is actually a truth claim. So we have to actually justify it. We have to actually look at the truth in that claim. If there is evidence to support that claim, then definitely it qualifies as knowledge. It qualifies as knowledge. But of course, a lot of sciences, a lot of knowledge, sciences is just a process to know things, and knowledge is actually another step towards truth. Okay, knowledge is part of the bigger project of in pursuit of truth. As you can see, the element of truth is built in the definition of knowledge, so much so that when we talk about Islamic economics, we have to be most serious about the quality of truth in whatever we are claiming about. Okay. What is then the Western theory of knowledge? All along, we have studied the principles of economics. There is principles of micro, principles of macro. These are just a reflection or abstraction or generalization of what we have gathered through our senses, what we have used our reason on, the logic that we can justify with certain theories like theory of inflation. There comes the question of the factors. You have demand pull, cost push. So all that is a method of reasoning that makes sense. Oh, yes, we have inflation. We have increase in general prices because of input costs. Higher input costs will be translated into higher prices, higher cost of production, and then higher prices. So this is something that is reasonable for us to appreciate. And in the case of authority, whenever we want to look at truth claims, sometimes we have to, or most of the time when we get it from a third party, then we have to look at the reliability issue and the authority of that party. So then standard of truth is empiricism and rationalism. So again, these are just definitions, quick definitions for us to get a grasp of the kind of quality of truth that conventional economics is talking about. Sciences, conventional sciences is talking about. One, it is about evidence from experience and observation. So if you have that, then it's all good. Okay, but then from the Islamic point of view, this is devoid of the presence of God. When actually, in the case of Islamic position, yes, we can look at empirical evidence, but we must know that this empirical evidence or whatever happening is just makhluk. Makhluk. With makhluk, then we have khaliq. Al-khaliq is Allah, none other than Allah. So whatever happening, whatever evidence, whatever thing that we observe, it is just makhluk. Ma siwa Allah. Anything other than God is makhluk. Okay, so so that is why we say that all the evidences, there is the one that is creating all that. It is through the qudrah and irada of Allah that we have all the happenings that we have. Okay, whether it's inflation, unemployment, all this is part of qudrah and irada of Allah. Okay, this is how we treat whatever happening, whatever observation that we have, whatever experience that we experience. So there is a higher understanding than just plain observation, that the way Islamic conventional economics is seeing it. Okay, and then you have secular rationalism, devoid of God, is just pure reason, no particular need of morality, no particular need of higher existence of God. In our discussion here is just plain pure reason discussion, based on facts and not revelation. So this is what Chapra would say, ER, Ahmad Chapra, ER being epistemology, experience and reason, basically experience and reason. Then you have that is the standard of truth of conventional economics. What about Islamic? Yes, we have hissi, we have aql, we have also khabar. And this is number 3 is the point, unique point. It's the very distinctive point of the Islamic part, where we can talk about khabar sadiq. Khabar sadiq, where we have the Quran, the Hadith, and also the reliable scholars. So the two slight difference is the nature, whether it's absolute, thubut, and also this reviewable. We can change. So in the case of the text, one can never change the text. Okay, the text of Islam is text of Quran in particular is preserved. So it is absolute in nature. And then we have the reliable past scholars. They have done their part. They have shared with us their wealth of knowledge, and they were responding to their specific concerns of their time. And so much so that if there is that need to review it, given the present day context, so be it. But then we have to look at them. We have to actually appreciate them, appreciate the past scholars. Okay, so we have, for instance, Al-Maqrizi. Maqrizi had done an interesting observation of factors leading to the economic problem of Cairo in the 14th century Islam. 14th century Islam and Cairo. Okay, interestingly, he actually identified money supply issue, the over circulation of bad money, low quality money in the economy, leading to the economic turmoil that Cairo was experiencing then. So as you can see, this kind of observations are useful, actually, useful. So number 4 is a bit more spiritual in nature. So this is where it is rather individualist in terms of experience, individual in terms of personal, in terms of experience. So it is beyond the discussion of practical sciences. It is more on ilmu tasawwuf and so on. So the standard of truth is then reason aided and guided by Quran Sunnah. So this is where we can talk about the 2-tier Al-Ghazalian 2-tier criteria, screening criteria. First, reason with evidence. If you look at things and there is some reason, solid reason backing up the explanation there, the description there, then we have the question on evidence. Is there any evidence backing up that reason? And then we can also, if that is passed, if there is clear evidence, proper reasoning comes with that proposition or explanation or truth claim, then we have to screen through the Quran and Sunnah. The Quran and Sunnah. So this is where when you talk about development, you can't talk about interest-based economy. You cannot, because even though logic seems to say, okay, you have the US, they are all financial capitalism. But then the Quran and Sunnah says you cannot be dealing with riba. So this is where you have to know the standard of truth in the end is actually guided and aided and guided by Quran and Sunnah. Okay, so that is the standard of truth for Islamic economics too. The main difference here, prominence and centrality of revelation. So here we can talk about Chapra just now. Another R, You have experience, you have reason, but in the case of Islam, you have revelation. How does this revelation comes about? Because we believe in God, right? We justify the existence of God. We have justified the oneness of God in our ilmu aqidah. So from there, you know that God exists, and God, with all his attributes, that is countless, he has his Al-Quran as Kalamullah, right? So that is that position, the position of revelation in our truth claims. And then the standard of truth is Tawhidic. Okay, the question of right and wrong just now must be coming back to the criteria of Quran and Sunnah. So why are we interested in this knowledge issue? It's because of the state of affairs in terms of Islamic economics knowledge. So you have 1976 to be the birth year of conventional economics. And usually this is the birth year of conventional economics because it coincides with the publication of Wealth and Nations. Then in the case of Islamic economics, we have this birth year, 1976, when we had this first International Islamic Economics Conference. Okay, so you have 2 centuries of lagging behind, 2 centuries of delay. So this is where we have to tap into conventional knowledge. We are able to tap into as long as we know the criteria. Okay, we apply the standard of truth that we treat as the Islamic standard of truth just now, and then we must also know that we have the Turath, which spans more than 1,000 years in terms of its legacy. So this is the responsibility of those Islamic economists. Okay, how's the time? I think I have another 10 minutes or so. Am I right? Organizer, I think, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
doctor. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. I have another. I have to go quicker then. Economic Sharia, and this is where we have to realize there is that wealth of knowledge in terms of substantive knowledge, in terms of methodological knowledge coming from economics. That is one part. The other part is the Islamic sciences, as I said just now. Okay, but we have to know the nature. Then only we know where lies the relevance of the specific method in economics, specific methods in fiqh or fiqh. Okay, so the nature will tell us. What is then the nature of economics as a discipline? It is descriptive and social science. It is very much descriptive, and so much so that it claims to be value-free. Claims to be value-free. And of course, alhamdulillah, Prof. Aslam has debunked that just now. I have negate that just now, saying that there's no such thing as value-free. Even the philosophers, or even Schumpeter talk about that. Schumpeter talk about that vision. Okay, so basically we have to be more cautious of all this claim about value-free. But at least they try to be descriptive. So they focus on how to describe a simple linear relationship or any relationship between dependent and independent variable. Okay, to explain economic reality. Just now I mentioned the example of inflation. Okay, we have the problem of inflation, and the causes could be either demand pull or cost push. Okay, cost push is relating to any rise in input costs. Okay, input costs like fuel, for instance. Okay, so it is about descriptive, and then try to look at the relationship and make it logical, and see the basis of the connection. There must be some logic that ties one variable to another, and one cause to another effect. So, and perhaps we can talk about multiple causes for a particular effect. Okay, and then as for the nature is aggregate, we look at the aggregation aspects. it is social science. You look at so many people behaving in this way, in this particular way. When price increase, quantity demanded, that I demand on that particular, or rather each consumer demand from that on that particular product reduces. So from that aggregate collective behavior, you can see that people behave in such a way. People behave in such a way. So much so that we can look at income effect and trying to explain the law of demand, for instance. And then concerns with policy issues that affect groups. In the end, economic policy, monetary policy, fiscal policy, it is affecting groups rather than just one person. Okay, the inflation issue, it is first and foremost a problem of a societal problem. So to have a very you want to restrict, you want to reduce money supply just to contain the pressure of inflation, it is actually one that is affecting the whole society. Okay, and of course, with ups and downs of the economy, you have permanence is not the character. You have to revise every now and then. And of course, economics is not about hukum syari. We are not looking at that aspects. Though we can contribute to hukum syari, given a wealth of knowledge in economics, we can advise the Sharia scholars on how to arrive at things. So we have units of analysis for economics. You look at real situations, economic in nature. And we can also talk about these tools. There are so many tools. One example is on units of analysis, on a method in particular, we have experimental studies nowadays, experimental method nowadays, especially with the advent of behavioral economics. So you have, I remember this one example of INET, Institute of New Economic Thinking. They try to look at how different motivational systems affect economic decisions. They use economic games. Let's say they prime the sample or the subject with care motives. Then what is the economic, the outcome of the economic game? And they change the motivation in where we can bring out new methods, including experimental methods in trying to understand economic behavior. In the case of Sharia, in case of Sharia, then I will not go into detail as to this nature or this definition. After all, you have look at it in the fiqh usul fiqh course. But one point, I remember Prof Aslam was talking about how we want to improve the state of affairs. Islamic Economics is entrusted to actually take up that challenge of improving the society. We cannot just be satisfied with just the issue of permissibility. So because of that, we have to view the Sharia in the manner of the way rather than the law. You cannot confine the Sharia understanding on the law. Instead, we have to view it as the way. And of course, sometimes we need the law to, or most of the time, actually, we need the law to guide us. But we have to know that Sharia must be understood in the way. So for that reason, I just want to highlight the concern about context, waqi', and also awlawiyats, the priorities of the given situation that we're in. So it is not as simple as looking at, okay, now we have cryptocurrency, halal, haram, just based on the text. A simple understanding, oh, there's no provision on it. Perhaps this is too simplistic in the way we look at cryptocurrency. We have to look at the waqi', we have to look at the awlawiyat. What happens if every one of us are into crypto? Is that something good? So these are the kind of questions that our scholars must be considerate of. For instance, this is one example given by Professor Tariq Ramadan in his talk about Sharia being the way, not just the law. He gave this particular example. on the topic of reform, he talks about this example of Sayyidina Umar's time, where he actually suspend hudud temporarily because of the famine, because of the widespread concern about the survival of life. People get into trouble with the law, so to say, restrictive understanding about the law when they steal for food and so on. So there is that case of how Sayyidina Umar was very much in view of the Sharia, the higher objective of the Sharia, the more greater concern of Sharia in the way he guides public policy. So fiqh is again wide. Sharia is wider than fiqh. Okay, it includes ahkam amaliyah and it includes i'tiqadiyah. It includes akhlaqiyah. So this is the wider scope of Sharia. So fiqh is again, just skip the definition there because of time. But the point here is you have that unit of analysis for fiqh is mainly primary sources, unit of analysis. So the fuqaha will dwell into the primary sources. In the end, they will try to provide normative, what should be done, what must be done by the individual. And that's where the final product of fiqh is, the Sharia ruling. Okay. And of course, these are the implications of prescriptive science. So you have prescription, prescriptive. Fiqh is to be viewed as a prescriptive science. Okay. And of course, alhamdulillah, all this are actually very much valuable, whether it's wajib, mandub, mubah, or makruh, haram, because it puts value on particular action. If it's wajib, okay, what is the requirement there? If it's mandub, if it's makruh, if it's haram. Classic example is that riba prohibition is haram, then that means anything related to that must be shunned away. We have to be sensitive to whatever haram and whatever leading to haram. Okay, that is why we have sad zara'i, blocking the means. Okay, so as one of the method. So usul al-fiqh is that methodology of arriving at fiqh, and of course the role there is to extend normative, what should be done. You have the Quran, you have the primary sources, but you have new situations and new, I cited the issue of cryptocurrency just now, new situation. So how do you deal with that? Of course, ijtihad. Of course, ijtihad, and this is where the methods available for the fuqaha. Okay, so where lies IE? How do you interact with Islamic economics? Some methods are useful. As I mentioned just now, if the question on rent, yes, rental of property is possible, but if you were to know that the rent is for the purpose to place a gambling activity, then definitely is support that kind of contract must be avoided. It must be avoided, even though rental activity in per se is halal. So this is where we can guide our policies using public interest, using some methods in usul al-fiqh. And Maqasid Sharia discussion is taking a new sphere altogether now, with IIIT being one of the active agent to talk about views on latest views on Maqasid Sharia from Tan Sri Daud Bakar, for instance. So you have this understanding that maslahah is in the end the prime objective of Maqasid. Okay, and by that it means that we want to prevent harm, we want to also provide benefit. In the view we define benefit and harm, we here, I mean the Islamic position, not just anyone claiming this is benefit, this is harm. We have to use it in Islamic lens to look at what is benefit and what is harm. It's not dependent on your own whims of how do you define benefit, how do you define harm. It is not as such. Okay. So how do you then develop Islamic economics? I need perhaps 5 more minutes, inshallah. So then we have this wealth of knowledge coming from economics, coming from fiqh and usul al-fiqh. Then how do you interact with them? How do you make it integrated and gel with one another? Okay, so I put here Islamic Economics thinking framework. So now I'm inviting all of you to be on this journey. Just now try to assume that you are actually an Islamic economist. So if you are playing that role, then you have to have this operational question at the back of your mind, the one that you want to answer. How do you use the sources of knowledge in Islam to develop Islamic economics, to deal with economic problems of the day? Okay, can be poverty, can be unemployment. So how do you use this creativity of sources of knowledge creatively? How do you use this wealth of sources of knowledge creatively in trying to solve economic problems? So for that reason, you have to continuously frame your thinking in terms of, okay, I have this worldview, I have this vision, I have this, then how do you give details as to what theories should we use, what kind of institutions can we develop so that we can have the Islamic economic system. Okay, so that is the ongoing process. Okay, among the vision, we can talk about the aim in life. What kind of happiness that we are talking about? Is it just material happiness? What about spiritual happiness? We must know that Islam take serious concern about spiritual happiness. Mental health issues must be one that is at the back of our mind, and when we want to progress. The worry is if you are into materialism, then chances are you will not be happy because you will always want this and that, this and that, this and that. You will be, you will not be arriving at the position of qana'ah, a sense of satisfaction with what you have, if that is your vision. But if you have a vision of the eternal life and eternal success, then you will know when to say stop. Like now again. Okay, just 2 more slides, I think, if I can finish off. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Can I do that?
Yes, yes. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Bismillah. So, what are the fields of work that Islamic economists must do? One is proposing the ideal. Proposing the ideal. And this is where we have to come back to a concept of Homo Islamicus. Okay, Homo Islamicus being the agent, and the agent or the role that we can play here, whether we are individual customers, we are, of course, when we start to be productive, we are working, we are trying to earn a living, we are part of the market, we are most concerned on government policies, and the government itself must think like an economic actor. After all, they spend money, governments spend money. Okay, so you have to frame the ideal economic behavior regardless of the hats that you are putting on. And then you evaluate. Islamic economists must then evaluate the actual behavior. And this is where our study on actual behavior is important. Okay, we have to then see the impact of the actual behavior. So you have a paper economy, financial capitalism. This is the impact. The impact is the rapidity of or the frequency of ups and downs of the economy is much more rapid, much more frequent. You have okay, every now and then you have recession and destruction of wealth could be seen when that happens. And then you have comparing ideal and actual behavior, explain the gap, why the gap exists, and from there, Islamic economists must think about a strategy to help the actors to come back or be closer to the ideal, try to be the Homo Islamicus conception that I will talk about in the next topic. Conclusion, So just one slide here. We have to realize we have to develop Islamic economics simply because it's part of practical science, simply because this is upon us to acquire. And then, of course, when it comes to fiqh, we have to be fiqh inspired, and not limited to that. So that we can actually assist the evolution of Homo Islamicus and the system, okay, and the system. And then last but not least, unlike other economists, if I were to stress on this point, Islamic economists do this. We try to achieve the maqasid, the maslahah concern, and we do it gradually so that in the end, we comply to ethical values in Islam, a topic that we'll touch on next. Sure. Okay, so can I just proceed? Bismillah, there is the content for. Can I just proceed to my the other?
Yes,
okay. Allow me to go to the next PowerPoint. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, Bismillah. Oh, sorry. Okay. Bismillah. So now, Bismillah, allow me to now go to the next topic. And the next topic is on Islamic ethics. And this is the outline. I wish to look at this issue on axiology, the study of values, the study of right and wrong, good and bad, and harmony, and beauty and harmony, in the manner that we can actually frame it along the lines of economics. Okay, so that's why just now I must thank Prof. Aslam to allow me now to talk about relative scarcity in a broader sense, so that we can see where lies the significance of Islamic economics, relevance of Islamic economics. Okay, for that reason, we have to bring to the core or to the fore the significance of Homo Islamicus. And I have to later on try to confine the discussion to the case of the Islamic consumer. Okay, before I conclude. Bismillah. Oh, by the way, just to put a conclusion, a proper conclusion to the previous topic, this methodology is still an ongoing discussion. The debate is livelier than before, alhamdulillah, but still there are different opinions on it. So let's be aware of that lah. Let's be aware of that. Okay. Okay. So what is then the whole objective here?
The PowerPoint's not up yet.
Oh, yeah, really?
The old one. Still the old one. Yeah.
It's still the old one. Okay.
Yeah, the previous one. Yeah.
I have to stop share and share again. Allow me to share again. Wait, it doesn't come. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay. Okay. How about now? Bismillah.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So these are the learning objectives. Again, I just want to increase awareness. You are all aware, and the presumption is every one of us here have good intent to improve ourselves. And by that, it means that we have tried our best to be Islamically ethical. The interest on this platform of learning more about Islamic economics is a testament to the fact that you are Islamically ethical, okay, to a certain extent. Of course, everyone have their limits in terms of or have their own weaknesses. We are most aware of that. It's just that in terms of whatever you already know, we want to bring it to the economic context. Okay, we can talk about Islamic ethics or akhlaq of patience, or akhlaq of moderation. We can talk about that, but we will try to bring it into the economic side. Economic side. And it is for that reason, perhaps this is where you need to know about Homo Islamicus. It is a conceptual discussion within Islamic economics, and chances are you might not come across this concept beyond Islamic economics if you were to study something else. Even in fiqh and also fiqh, they don't conceptualize this Homo Islamicus agent as such. But in our case, because of the centrality of economic agency issue, we have such conception. Prof. Aslam mentioned about Homo economicus just now, the way we learn man's behavior within the psyche of conventional economics, neoclassical way of framing man's behavior. That is something that Prof. Aslam has mentioned, and for that reason, we can come up with this Homo Islamicus as another concept of economic agency. And then finally, we try to appreciate moral principles for Islamic consumer. After all of us are consumers. At any point in time, we will be buying lunch later, we'll be preparing for lunch later, we'll buy for whatever we eat. I mean, in a way, either you cook or you still buy something. So yeah, we are always a consumer of something. Okay, excuse me. Bismillah. Okay, the slide is not moving, so Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let me try and stop share and try share again. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Oh, Bismillah. It does not move. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So definitions on ethics, moral, and principle. I must thank IIIT in particular because of one online program, and this is on ethics, and ethics and morality in Islam by Professor Dr. Anis Ahmad. I suggest all of us here to look at that to get a better tasawwur or overall scheme of understanding on ethics and morality in Islam. So here I just use basic definitions here, which you can Google and get from dictionaries. Ethics is moral principles about behavior. Okay, that is one point, behavior. And then what is then moral? Moral is the principles of right and wrong. Basically, now we talk about right and wrong. We have to be interested in what is proper. And then a principle is a fundamental truth of propositions. It is a fundamental truth. This is where we can look at the sources of Islamic ethics. Is divine. That is the ultimate truth. That is the standard of truth that we apply in Islamic economics. So that's why we have to be guided by such principles, which I will explain a bit later. So how do you then frame Islamic ethics? Again, it is about conduct. It is about behavior. So when we want to look at proper conduct, we have such knowledge in fiqh and akhlaq. Just now I explained to you how fiqh is a normative science. It is actually prescriptive. So it is about the individual conduct. What should we do? If it's haram, this is the prescribed action. if it's mandub and so on. Okay, there is that prescription of actions from ilm fiqh. And to perfect it, to perfect our action, we have the wealth of ilmu akhlaq. Ilmu akhlaq, sometimes you can look at it from ilmu tasawwuf. So all that combined can explain what is Islamic ethics. Sometimes people just focus on ilmu akhlaq to say Islamic ethics, but the way I understand it, it must be a combination of both. You have ilmu fiqh and ilmu akhlaq. Again, these are actually one that guides action. Okay, guides action. And the characteristic of Islamic ethic is divine. We have the primary text as the source. Okay, and the beauty of that source is that we become very objective in what is right, what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. And the beauty, again, on top of that, we don't depend on subjective evaluation of one philosopher versus philosopher B, versus philosopher C, versus philosopher D, E, and what have you. So you have that objectivity built in the way we come to know about what is the right Islamic action. And it is also universal. Let's talk about patience, for instance. How is it that patience is not a virtue? Let's talk about justice. How adl? How is it that any society doesn't want justice? So that is, after all, Islam is actually a universal message of truth, of goodness, promoting maslahah for mankind in the right definition and frame of action. So for that reason, you have that universal feature built in. And then, of course, it's meaningful. Now we interact with one another with a sense that, okay, this person is an employer of mine. He has certain haq on me, and I have certain haq on him too, as employees. So that interaction with nature, for instance, with the environment, people talk about SDGs nowadays, but sustainability nowadays, that brings meaning to our behavior. Okay, we have to interact with the environment, the resource, the future generation. We have to be mindful of the future generation. Yeah. So, and all that is geared towards this attainment of Allah, attainment of mardatillah, the rida of Allah. So that is the character of Islamic ethics. It is not pointless. It is not meaningless. It is not subjective. And for that reason, we have this organ, this organ, spiritual organ called qalb. It is a spiritual organ first and foremost. Just look at this definition, hadith. This is where the Prophet talks about the soundness of one's action. Okay, it is very much dependent on the quality of the heart, quality of qalb, purity of qalb, cleaning of the heart, cleansing of the heart. This is why ilmu akhlaq is needed on top of ilmu fiqh. Okay, to bring it in the more economic sense to that Islamic ethics, the broad understanding of Islamic ethics or Islamic ideology, we have to then look at it, how is it connected to economics? So this is where I believe all of us are aware of these concepts. Need, basically, this is upon survival. What is it that we want for survival? And once is something more above and beyond that of needs. And then the scarcity is the context of unlimited ones and with limited resource. How do you deal with this mismatch, I would say, mismatch? But we have to frame the mismatch in a right way. And demand is willingness and ability to buy. So we have the consumer power. Consumer power have some power to influence the suppliers. And some after all, any not supply, supplier, demander, supplier. In this case, it's producer. We can talk about seller or any seller in the marketplace. anyone's supplying goods and services, they want to have profit. They want to have profit. This is where profit must tie to demand, or rather their activities must tie to demand for their own survival. For the survival of the firm, they have to be aware of the demand of the society. So that is the overall concept that frames the scarcity issue. In the broadest sense of the word scarcity, you cannot, you might be having a bit of a confusion. We have to actually frame it in these two branches, existence and availability. Okay, existence and availability will tell us that there is a slight focus, or there's an avenue for us to talk about scarcity when we look at availability, not existence. We are not questioning existence. We are analytically looking at the question of what's available. And what's available depends on our existing stock of knowledge, our effort, and the time we put in, the time horizon, the time span that we have in a certain project. That is what allows us to have as resource, as economic resource. On the other side, on the other hand, we have the question of choices. These choices will talk about how do we use the resources that comes from the factors just now. Okay, you have available resource, but the use of the resource will very much depend on our consumption, production, and distribution. Okay, and one big issue, just to look at one issue, is about riba. Okay, riba has a great implication on how resources are allocated. Okay, and then the question of distribution, it has great implication on personal income. It has great implication on the gap between the rich and the poor. So this is again, I just want to take this opportunity to invite you to join towards riba-free Pakistan by 2027. This program by the Center of Islamic Economics on the 9th. A bit of advertisement there because of the topic lah. Topic riba-free, and how we can look at it as part of this distribution issue, consumption issue, production issue. This is a bit lengthy, but it frames it rightly. So Professor Zubair Hassan is IDB award winner for his contribution on Islamic economics, IDB being Islamic Development Bank. So this is a student of Prof Aslam here again, Wahab Bari, in his paper under the supervision of Prof Aslam. I take this quotation from Zubair Hassan, of course. So here, as you can see, scarcity is real actually, but it is in what form that we have to understand scarcity. If we question the fact that God has, if we say God has given us not enough, then that is wrong. God has given us enough. Okay, it is upon our knowledge to know what are the right resources, what are the available resources for us to then enjoy. And we cannot be cleaning our hands and say that our over supply of over demand of luxurious goods take away resource from for the basic necessities. It's yeah, again, we cannot just clean our hands and say we are free from that kind of critique as consumers. It does have, the ultra rich is quite responsible for this. So yes, they, whatever they demand, there are resources dedicated for that, and that resource will take away, given that the available pool of resource is a certain amount, then whatever diversion to the over luxurious things will actually have impact on the availability of resources for the necessities. Okay, so it is there's a trade-off there, and we are focusing on the what's available. Okay, this is where I frame the scarcity in this manner. Existence is about absolute scarcity concept. So when we will talk about existence, this is a discussion. Unlike Western secular, we reject. Unlike Western secular economics, Islamic economics reject absolute scarcity, because we know in the end Allah can give, and we cannot deny that. And then there are verses saying that we have been given enough. Allah has given us more than that we can chew. We have abundant resource, provided that we have to put more knowledge in research and development to know that, okay, actually this biotech, for instance, the development in biotechnology, and never do we know that, okay, this herb is useful for this ailment or this sickness or this, it can be what do you call this, economic good for dealing with health issues. So we need to put research and development for us to get more available resource, and from there we can talk about relative scarcity. So at any point in time, you as a economic agent have to deal with decisions, have to make decisions at any point in time. So if you frame yourself as an economic agent with whatever available resource that you have at that particular point in time, then you realize, yes, I have limited amount of things that I can use. Right? So that is the frame of relative scarcity. So if you have such experience, then you are experiencing relative scarcity. So relative scarcity in the context of individual action or a firm, you want to do this, you want to do that, but you have limited resource as a firm. Okay, then that is actually about relative scarcity. So relative scarcity in terms of reality is real. Okay, it's real. Okay, so you have to look at the supply side. You have to know that all this effort and time given to research and development will allow us to get more available, as I said just now. So from there, the Islamic economists will frame it from the supply side and also the demand side. The demand side will talk about consumption, production, and distribution. If you were to take haram activity, or if you allow for haram activities, then you are using those available resource for things which are not improving the morality of the society, not improving or leading us to the true meaning of Islamic economic development, true meaning of happiness in the end, whether at the world level or even at the in the hereafter, more importantly in the hereafter. So if you talk about riba, for instance, it will create chaos in the economy. You have every now and then again, you have recession upon recession, and you have that kind of destruction of wealth. And all this actually real. And what more, Quran itself talk about destruction of wealth in connection to riba activities. Okay, so that's where we have to not take things as given. Unlike conventional economics, when they take the neutral stance, the value-free stance, the objective, quote-unquote stance or approach, then they are a bit of a handicap to talk about, to question what's given, to question the given preferences, to question the position of the suppliers. In our case, we have, as economic agents, we talk about consumption and production and the responsibility of those economic agents. You cannot just ask for israf. You cannot be keeping up with the Joneses, or living up with the Joneses, or keeping up with the Joneses. Or be in this materialistic mode. And if your neighbor have this, and then you want to buy also, without proper evaluation on whether you really need it. Okay, so that is where the ethical concern comes about. Simple act of preventing wastage could help, could do wonders, could do wonders in dealing with the relative scarcity issue. So the point here is simple. Relative scarcity is real and it's not un-Islamic. Okay, it is not un-Islamic. The ethical position here is one that is in the society is in need of.
Recording in
ability
progress.
to actually in pursuit of ahsani taqwim. We want to be actually the best among God's creations. Okay, this is where I will now talk about these roles of man, istimar, abd, and khalifa. When I share with you this, you can just click on this to actually watch the video. And this is where Sheikh Yusop is talking about these three roles, quoting Raghib as-Fahani. And what is then the implication? So if you are in the know of who you are, then you know that we are meant for progress. God has given, we are the only creatures or makhluk of Allah that can build civilizations. Yeah. You have complicated structures by animal this, animal that. You have the spider web. Yes, all these are God's creation, but we cannot expect what do you call this, animals like spiders and whatever to build civilization. This is just not part of the endowment given to those animals. Yeah? Unlike us, man has this special prestige of among the among the makhlukats. So we have to take up this role of istimar. We want to progress collectively. We want to also express our role as abd. Just now, Prof talked about ibadah umum. Yes, either khusus, siyah, or umum. We are in that mode of activity. Mode of activity of abd. Okay, and then that's where we have to know that we are entrusted nature, we are entrusted the universe, we are supposed to treat them as ayatullah, signs of Allah, and it is through our interaction with this other makhluk that we can actually play out our role as Khalifa. So who is then this Homo Islamicus? Okay, so you have the roles in mind. So who is this then? The economic agent. The economic agent in Islamic economics, as Furqani has given us again. Here, as you can see, I try to bring recent articles, very recent works. So in Islamic economics, Homo Islamicus is this agent that's committed to the values prescribed in Islam. Values here refers to not just the fiqh values, but also moral values, or akhlaq values that is there. And we are not supposed to be arrogant with what we have, right? We are not supposed to be hasty in our decision or show hasad in our actions. Hasad cannot be a motive and economic objective. Shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Hasad shouldn't be an economic objective. And Islamic ethical position is very much prevalent in trying to portray the Islamic teachings. Okay, you have learned all kinds of Islamic teachings, and all that requires the agent. The agent is here Homo Islamicus. Okay, you have to be altruistic, thinking about others. You have to also know that we are committed to Islamic values. We are committed to social justice and welfare. Never are we individualistic. Yes, we can think about our concern, but think also about others. Okay, think also about others. It is part of our psyche. It is part of our standard operation procedure. Okay, and of course you have to frame priorities in trying to capture the interest of others as well. You have to make that a sequence of priorities. So Homo Islamicus as a code of conduct, this is how it is framed. You have maslahah. Of course, the well-being must capture the essence of man. The essence of man is just not physical only. You have, in my paper, I talk about ruh, qal, akal, nafs, referring to Al-Ghazali's work, Kitab al-Qalb. Kitab al-Qalb being the 21st kitab in Ihya Ulumuddin. He talk about ruh, qal, akal, nafs. These concepts have different connotations. And then it has different needs that must be entertained, that must be satisfied. And this is where once you are, as an economic agent, enlightened with this understanding, then you will know that it is required upon you to be balanced. If you are materialistic, materialism is what? Materialism is just that focus on material happiness. Money can buy happiness. That is your mantra in life. And once you have that, then you will just focus on how can you gather more and more money. Is that all life is? And this is where we have to see it as a reflection. The question really requires us to have this introspective position on our own nature, our own understanding of who we are and what are our roles and what kind of responsibilities and amanah that we have. And how do you then interact with other members of the society, living and non-living things? How do you interact with your neighbor and so on? So all that have rights and obligations that we have to frame in this code of conduct. Okay. And I just want to now highlight slight major differences, I would say, in a very concise manner, by looking at what are the goals of Homo economicus. Utility maximization. They talk about profit maximization. Simple profit maximization, simple utility maximization if you are a consumer. But in the case of Homo Islamicus, we have to think about maslahah maximization. We have to think about others. We have to know that in others, others have haq on us. Whatever wealth we have, the asnaf has haq on those wealth. We have to be wary of that. So that is how we frame our maslahah maximization. We have to be in tune with that. So how do you then play out that end of that asnaf? You have to fulfill the haq of whoever is the organizer. CIE, Center of Islamic Economics, must fulfill the haq of the lecturers, and at the same time we have to also fulfill the haq of the organizers for this course. Okay, so that's where the means are. That's how we can achieve the ends. And of course, piety helps. If you are aware that you are actually in doing an amal saleh, then you are rightly guided. You are rightly guided, inshallah. So I now bring up this case of Islamic consumer to then apply, to give a face to the concerns that we have framed in the earlier slides. Now, epistemologically speaking, all moral values in Islam are the conventional economic talk about social justice. But then again, in our case, we have Quran and Sunnah. It's divine, because if you were to talk about roles, then another philosopher might disagree with roles. So in the end, everything is relative, and you start to bog down to the question of right and wrong in a very subjective manner. So we skip that. We just want to portray what's good from the Quran and Sunnah. So we don't have that debate anymore. We know that, okay, Quran and Sunnah has guided us on the principles of ethics. So let's take it, let's apply it. You see, we have saved a lot of process there. I remember watching an atheist. He takes a scientific worldview. So he says, science can discover ethical values. If that is the case, then your society is actually one that is always lagging behind. You have to do science first, only then you discover ethical values. Okay, so this is how we can save time. Alhamdulillah, with Homo Islamicus, we have the principles of ethics in Islam, and that is defining our interaction with God. Actually, this is the word ontology here. Yeah, our moral principles and how we adopt those moral values are a reflection of God's existence, whether in terms of the concept itself, but more importantly is the action of us, whether we are consumer, whether a producer, the fact that we do it as a proper ibadah with the right intent, with the right Sharia compliant measures and means and methods will actually allow us to attain that higher goal in life, or the ultimate happiness that we seek for. Okay, so it is actually a reflection of that. That is the whole philosophy of Islamic economics. The principles now, I think I only have maybe 10 minutes just to wrap things up. I'm sorry, I think I have to end it at 1. Is that okay with the organizer? Because I have to another matter to deal with after 1. So with this, I just continue. I am just highlighting my time limitation here. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So these are the 4 principles. You have permissibility principle, you have responsibility principle, you have balance principle, you have priority principles. So in these principles, as you can see, permissibility is the foundation of it. You have to be talking about foundation of Islam. What defines Islam must be permissible. Anything that is not permissible is actually giving more harm than good. That is how even the Quran talks about the prohibition of khamar. Right? It does give some benefit, but the harm is much more than the benefit. Okay, and that's how the Quran frames the permissibility on the issue of khamar. So the quality there is the harm, anything that is within the haram category, it is having greater harm than good. And again, our fiqh scholars, our usuli scholars have done a great job in assisting us with that kind of guided action. Okay, so this is where our frame of discussion is. We have to respect that. We have to be sensitive to the question of halal and haram. Halal and haram is numero uno, so to say. So then we bring out this responsibility issue. Yes, we are aware of our responsibility, taklif. We are not just hedonistic users of goods and services just for short-term pleasure. That's not the way we understand it. And this is where we put, again, under the frame of responsibility, principle of responsibility, taklif, we have to be moderate, show that we are able to balance our action within the extreme, in between the extremes of tabzir, in between of the extreme of bukhul, israf, and so on. So these the 2 extremes. At one extreme is tabzir and israf, excessive use of the resource, and the other is actually the stinginess. You don't even want to spend on your needs, even though you are having the means to do so, income to do so, the wealth to do so, but you are just stingy and bukhul. And then, of course, these are the hierarchy of needs and the maqasid sharia, the maslahah domain of the maqasid, talking about daruriyat, hajiyat, and tahsiniyat, and the rest of the principles will be spelled out here now. So permissibility, if it's not halal, then please, we have to make a commitment, try our very level best to do away with it. To do away with it. We have to. For our interest, first and foremost, and of course, it is also for the interest of our loved ones. Because I remember my wife used to work in a female chapter home. She said one of the main reason why wife got beaten up by the husband is because they come back drunk and they start to create havoc in the house, start to beat the family members and so on. This is among non-Muslims. She was observing this kind of actions. So again, there's always, you just have to take this principle of everything that's halal, there is greater harm, haram, everything that's haram have greater harm than good. Okay, and that's how we guide ourselves with as a consumer and producer. Boundaries are not to restrict, it is just to guide. And after all, it is, again, as I said, using that example just now, it is to avoid harm. Our responsibility, in the example given just now, the husband's responsibility to actually protect and create harmony within the family, right? So that is the kind of responsibility that our actions could attain if we were to be respectful to the question of permissibility, responsibility, moderate, and so on. And all the ethical standards of Islam that we can talk about. And by the way, the 4 principles here are not limited to just 4. This is just, again, it is coming from one article from Hafiz Furqani, Dr. Hafiz Furqani, on these 4 principles. But of course, these 4 principles are not limited to just 4. So we have this taklif responsibility. In the end, what's halal and haram will contain you, will control you. Yes, you want to try this, but alhamdulillah, this is haram. So once this haram, then you act like Homo Islamicus, you stay away from that. And it really helps you from later repercussions in your action. Okay, that's how you can be guided by this halal and haram and all this makruh, mandub, and so on. Okay, and so that in the end, we are always in that progress. We are always in that progress towards falah. Okay, balance. We cannot overconsume, we cannot underconsume. Then if you are able to do that, we have this equilibrium as such. We are creating such equilibrium. By that also, we are actually we are addressing the relative scarcity by doing so. By doing that, we are actually addressing or giving solution to the relative scarcity problem that we come to know about. So we have to avoid tabzir. We have to avoid israf, even though israf here looking at lawful things which are lawful, food, but we do israf. We buy too much. We buy and we have this impulsive buying. With online this, as easy as a click. You just be in that mode of materialistic mode of buying and buying and buying without really be considerate of the effect on your budget, the effect on your spending on spiritual activities, for instance. So This is the kind of israf that we have to be avoiding, and bukhul, of course. So as for priorities, we can frame it in the manner of daruriyat, hajiyat, tahsiniyat. And by definition, daruriyat is essential. Talking about the essentials in life, we have to cater that first and foremost. Yeah? You cannot be having the most expensive car, but actually day-to-day food on the table is something that is a problem to you, right? You cannot be putting wrong priorities, in other words. Okay. So again, I think running short of time, I have a personal matter to address. I think this last slide, this is actually the last slide. Yeah. So concluding remark, if I may, the concluding remark will tell us that religious custody is actually a universal problem. So if we address it, we are addressing a universal problem. We are giving a solution to the whole wide world, not just today, but also later in the near future. So sustainability issue is something that we can embrace, we can be sensitive to, okay? And then for that reason, we have to make the right economic decisions. We have to be balanced, we have to be comprehensive. We cannot just satisfy our physical improvement. You get the best cars, the best clothes, and so on and so forth, but we don't spend enough on things that can improve our intellectual welfare or even spiritual welfare. Yeah. Okay. So this is where we have to frame our economic decision making in the right way, and then for that reason, alhamdulillah, Islam gives us the principles. If you talk about ilmu akhlaq, there's a wide spectrum of discussion in sifat mazmumah and mahmudah that we have to be sensitive to. We cannot show arrogance, takabur, and hasad, and so on. We have to be showing patience. With patience itself will tell us that we cannot engage in impulsive buying. Just buy. That kind of situation actually requires us to be more patient, take it all in, make proper evaluation on the pros and cons of any economic decision. So inshallah, all that framed in the right way will allow us to attain the very best for us and also for the economy. Not just today, but most importantly in the hereafter. It is falah that we try to seek, and inshallah we'll attain it. Okay, alhamdulillah, that is where I want to stop. It's already one. And,
okay, so yeah, thank you, Dr. Mahyudi, for the presentations. So I think because of the times that we have, we are not able to entertain any questions from the participants. Yeah, there's a lot of questions with regard to where we can get the slide. I think you can get the slide from the WhatsApp, from the Telegram group. That's from IIIT. And then the kuliah of Islamic Economic and Management Sciences under the Center for Islamic Economics. We will also come up with a website for this certificate, and we will also put the slide in the Center for Islamic Economic website. Okay, so thank you everyone for participating.